What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto escaped from Tartarus? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. A sandaled foot sprung from a branch and towards another tree. The person springing from tree to tree had a large scroll strapped securely to his back and a smirk gracing his lips. Feels great to be back, he thought to himself as he then grabbed a branch into a flip and landed on the ground in a crouch. The person's spiky blonde locks were illuminated in the pale moonlight of the forest. The rain coming down to soak him, yet his cargo, the sacred scroll of sealing, somehow remained dry. Probably some kind of seal, the blonde thought as he then reached behind him and placed a hand on the scroll. He then forced his chakra into it, and the scroll began to shrink down until it was the size of a normal scroll. Smirking, the blonde then placed that into one of the two kunai holsters on his right thigh. If I had known it could do that 5 years ago, I don't think Mizuki would have been able to tell I even had it. The blonde then thought before looking around and nodding to himself. He quickly formed a seal with his hands and focused on the forest around him. A nifty trick his sensei Yamato taught him was feeling out for the chakra signatures of others when being followed. Going to have to thank him for those private lessons if we ever meet again. The blonde thought to himself, then frowned. About 6 signatures were heading his way. 2 of whom he really didn't want anything to do with. Bakuha Bunshin no Jutsu. The blonde then cried with a quick hand seal and 4 identical blondes appeared around him. Keep them busy as long as you can. Use that move if you have to, just don't let them find me. The original told his clones, who all nodded as the blonde then jumped off, leaving his clones behind. The clones waited in the shadows for their own opponents, but not for long as they arrived and the clones went to attack. Forming a seal, the one with the most chakra quickly called out aloud, "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu." And 50 extra blondes appeared, the original clone vanishing with a poof of smoke as the clones charged the team of Chunin Junin level ninja. They attacked swiftly, using kunai to block the kunai and blades of their enemies. The clones fought while the Bakuha Bunshin stayed behind, waiting for the signal to use their special technique. One clone jumped into the air and used a Rasengan, not as powerful as the originals, but he managed to knock a pink-haired girl into a tree with the force of the attack, knocking her out as a result. A black-haired boy with a long sword, who was then attacked by 10 of the clones, then destroyed the first of the clones. Each of the remaining conscious members of this little retrieval squad were beginning to tire, but started to use more dangerous methods of attacking the clones. The original, however, couldn't help a light chuckle that escaped his throat when the memories of the Kage Bunshin came to him. Let's slow them down a little bit more, he thought darkly to himself and uttered a single word. Boom! With that, a massive explosion sounded from behind him, followed by 2 more from the area he had left his Bakuha Bunshin. Well, that should have knocked the wind out of them, the blonde said to himself as he increased his speed, heading straight towards the valley of the end. No, the beginning of my new life, the blonde thought to himself as he continued through the trees at a breakneck pace. The ninja whom were supposed to retrieve the blonde were worse for wear. Another of them was now unconscious. Knocked out from the blast of those Bakuha Bunshin, the black-haired youth growled and jumped off after the blonde, ignoring the calls for him to stay back as he rushed through forest, black eyes flashing red as he did so. He sped up, going faster than what should have been humanly possible, entering a dark cave as he did. The blonde ninja from before soon jumped out of a cave, and landed on the head of a statue. His spiky blonde locks shined brightly in the moonlight, as his tan features showed the 3 whiskers he had on each cheek and shining blue eyes. He was wearing a blood-red t-shirt that had a black Anbu shirt beneath it, with a black strap over his chest that was attached to a sheathed ninjutsu on his back, a gray utility belt around his waist. A pair of black shinobi pants with the ankles held down with metal mesh and gray metal shin guards. A pair of black sandals under those. On his arms he wore metal mesh over his forearms with gray VAM braces over them and black fingerless gloves with metal plates at the backs. The blonde looked to the valley with a smirk, looking down upon what he and Sasuke had fought in so many years ago, the same place that had once decided who he would be. How appropriate that he would start over here. About time you got here, he then said while turning as the black-haired nin leapt from the cave and landed before him. Teme. the blonde said to the black-haired boy, the rain still pouring down as his blue eyes looked out from behind his spiky black hair to his former friend. What the hell has gotten into you, Dobie? The dark-haired teen demanded, and the blonde smirked to himself. Wouldn't he like to know? Earlier that day, Uzumaki Naruto was a boy whom had many things happen to him in the past. Torture, assassination attempts, and beatings were commonplace for him. However, for the last few years he had been having more trouble dealing with people outside the village instead of within it. Not the least of which was the attack on Akatsuki just a few days prior, which had left him bedridden. The blonde boy had managed to infiltrate the base, defeat the remaining members including his former friend Sasuke, and then took on Madara Uchiha. However, during the final battle with the insane original Uchiha, the teen was badly injured, leaving him hospitalized. Naruto was in a hospital bed, his face and body bandaged up, eyes moving beneath their lids. To lose a loved one at such a tender age is a tragic thing, child. Can you go on knowing you're the reason she is no longer with you? Or will you take the easy way out? Will you forget her sacrifice, and allow me to end you as well? A dark male voice questioned in his mind as a red seal appeared on his forehead. The seal was slowly fading. The edges were seemingly burning away. Alright Naruto, I want you to concentrate, then follow what I do. A woman's voice said as Naruto's teeth were gritted in the bed and he began to shake. Good job Naruto. That's my boy. The same female voice said and Naruto's eyes watered, tears falling down his cheeks. Come on Naruto, if you do good, I'll buy you a treat. The woman's voice came again, with a soft laugh following her voice. Naruto clenched his fists, as his eyebrows knitted together, whole body shaking once more. Flashback. A blonde 5-year-old sat down on a chair with a scowl, bruises and scrapes all over him as a woman started using some minor medical jutsu. Naruto, why do you always get in trouble? I know the other kids don't like you, but please try and ignore them. For me, the woman pleaded, her golden yellow eyes looking to the blonde-haired child pleadingly, and he simply crossed his arms and looked to the side. Why should I? Everyone's always mean to me. The blonde mumbled and the woman smiled softly before wrapping her arms around him in a gentle embrace. His eyes softened as she did and he leaned into her. Why doesn't anyone like me? I try to make friends. But, the boy said softly, and the woman scratched the boy's head lightly. They just don't understand Naruto. Give them time and they'll all come around. The woman told him sagely, but the boy didn't know. I promise you Naruto, someday, this entire village will stop disrespecting you. You'll be acknowledged as the little hero you are. The woman said with a small smile to the blonde, who gave her the tiniest of smiles. Oh come on, you can do better than that. She then said, and the blonde boy smiled widely to his mother. That's better, she said with a laugh and hugged the boy, making him smile once more as he leaned into her shoulder. End flashback. The blonde gritted his teeth in pain as more flashes passed by his eyes. The seal on his head was now halfway gone. The wounds covering the boy's body all began to glow an eerie crimson before then healing over, not even leaving a scar or bruise left on him. Blue eyes opened as he felt a barrage of memories assault his mind, none stronger than the ones of the woman with the golden yellow eyes and blood-red hair. The boy felt his eyes widen as a memory hit him harder than any of the others, his eyes widening as it passed before his eyes. Flashback. An 8-year-old Naruto backed away from a man. His mother, Uzumaki Kushina, was there holding him tightly. The two were in her apartment, one she and he had lived in all his life. The man before them wore black Anbu armor, with the right half of a tiger mask and a black face mask covering his face, leaving only his left eye and white hair visible. In one hand the man carried a sword, covered in blood from some of his mother's guards. Naruto, his mother whispered as the fearful Naruto continued to watch as the man walked ever closer towards them. Always remember, no matter what, I'll always love you. With that she gave one last hug to the blonde and stood up to look towards the man, whom used a hand to wipe away the blood on it. So, do you really believe you can do anything to stop me? The man questioned with a stiff monotone. Kushina simply smiled sadly towards the man. Possibly not, but if I can give my son, even another minute to live, that would be enough for me. She told the man simply, and his single eye looked at her with something similar to respect for only a short few moments. Be that as it may. You're weak now, you've allowed your skills to degrade. The once feared Beni Tenshi of Uzu no Kuni has become a shell of her former self. You're no more than a helpless woman now. The man said darkly, and Kushina shook her head. I'm not a helpless woman. I'm a mother, and I have a child to protect, she said as she pulled a kunai from her black dress and held it up. And in nature, a mother is the most fierce of any species when you threaten their children, she said to him, and the man twirled his sword in hand once, then leveled it onto his shoulders. Nice speech, but this isn't nature, my dear. This is life, the man said, and pressed a hidden button on the staff, a blade coming out of the end on both sides. And life is often much more cruel than nature, the man said to the woman darkly as Naruto hid in his mother's shadow. Naruto, run, get out of here now. Never look back, the woman then stated, and Naruto still couldn't seem to move from his spot as the man's cold gray glared into his blue eyes. Kushina didn't bother trying to tell him twice as she rushed towards the man. He moved back away from her attack and swung his sword. Kushina ducked down and stabbed upwards, but the man grabbed her wrist and then kicked her in the face, sending her into beside Naruto. Mom, Naruto finally cried and went to her side. The woman groaned as Naruto helped her up. The heavy falls of the man's feet alerted them both to his presence as he stalked towards them, his ninjutsu leveled onto his shoulders. Naruto hugged his mother tightly, and Kushina glared at the man in defiance. Such a disobedient boy, the man said with a shake of his head as he loomed over the two. You should have heeded your mother's words, child, and ran while you still had the chance, the man said darkly to the young blonde-haired child. Kushina quickly used this distraction to lunge at the man, however, and brought her kunai to his throat. The man grabbed her wrist with his left hand, holding her hand back as she used both to try and plunge the kunai into his throat. There was a splatter of blood, which wasn't that of the man, however, as a small trickle of blood went down Kushina's chin, his sword having pierced her stomach and exited through her back. Naruto, run, Kushina said as she turned to look at the blonde one last time, eyes full of unshed tears, before the man kicked her off himself. Naruto somehow managed to do as told this time as he ran, with wide fearful eyes, from the killer. The man looked at Kushina as she looked at him defiantly one last time. Humph, such a waste, my dear. I was only supposed to kill the child. You would have been wise to run yourself, the man said darkly as he then pulled his sword from her body and left her on the ground bleeding as he continued his pursuit of young Naruto. The blonde child ducked into an alley and then ran into a wall in his triad escape. He turned around to leave, only to find the masked man standing there, his bloody ninjutsu in one hand. The man looked at Naruto as he backed into a wall, and then fell down, shaking and crying as the masked man stared at him coldly. To lose a loved one at such a tender age is a tragic thing, child. Can you go on knowing you are the reason she is no longer with you? Or will you take the easy way out? Will you forget her sacrifice, and allow me to end you as well? The man spoke darkly, and Naruto remembered his mother's face, the tears in her eyes and the blood flowing from her wounds. Naruto didn't remember what happened next, only seeing red and a deep voice speaking into his ears angrily. Pathetic ninja, how dare he attack me? Naruto woke up later and looked around with wide eyes. He looked at himself and found that nothing seemed wrong. No blood, no wounds, no scars. What had happened? Hokage-sama, can't you see now? The boy is a brat. A fucking selfish brat. Who let them all die? Came a shout from outside, and Naruto looked to a window in a door to see two shadows. That is not true, Kakashi. The boy has had to watch his own mother be murdered. He was angry and frightened. No doubt the beast merely used his anger to free itself. For a short time at least. The sound of a familiar voice greeted Naruto. A voice he knew belonged to the old man, or the third Hokage. I know that, but Rin is dead, Hokage-sama. She was protecting that brat. It's his fault she had to die. Why didn't he save her if he has this damn power? The same Mon's voice came as Naruto listened. He knew a Rin. Auntie Rin. She was always so nice. But now, tears filled the boy's eyes as he looked to the foot of the bed. His auntie was gone too. Kakashi, you're acting stubborn and foolish. If Minato could see you now, he'd be rolling over in his own grave because of your words. The third roared, and Naruto stiffened. He'd never heard the old man so pissed off before. It's not Naruto's fault this man came after him, nor is it Naruto's fault Ren and Kushina are both dead. The man growled, and he saw Kakashi's shadow stiffen. Yes, it is Hokage-sama, he didn't save them. Only he lived, they both died while he survived. If he could beat that man, why didn't he save them as well? The man shouted once more, and Naruto saw then old man literally punch Kakashi in the face from the way the shadows moved. Hokage-sama. The man sounded both confused and slightly afraid as the old man loomed over him with an angry scowl over his face. Kakashi, how dare you? That child has nothing left, and you have the audacity to blame him for this. You can blame a child for being afraid of someone who's older, bigger, and stronger than him for running away. I'm sure Minato, Kushina, Rin, and Obito would be ashamed of you right now, and that's not thinking of your mother and father. The old man growled out at the man now on the ground. There was a tense silence for a few moments before then letting out a sigh. What do we know about that man Kakashi? I want everything your Anbu have found out. The Sandaime stated angrily, and Kakashi was silent for a few moments. No name, no village of origin, not even a fucking record in the bingo book, sir. This man, he was a nameless ghost. He was nothing, and as such he was also the perfect assassin. Kakashi replied softly, barely speaking above a whisper as Naruto sat back and listened sadly. Who hired him? Sandaime questioned, and Kakashi was silent. Kakashi, WHO hired that man to murder Naruto? The Sandaime demanded, and Kakashi let out a long sigh. A member of the council, sir. Miss Haruno Kasumi. She was apparently jealous over Kushina having Minato-sama and decided to take her child away from her, just to make her suffer. I can't believe she would do this, Hokage-sama. How could she allow her crush on Minato-sensei to take such control of her? I mean, she has a husband and daughter for Kami's sake. Kakashi replied, then added while the Sandaime growled angrily. Her family are known for being fanatically obsessive. I just hope it doesn't spread to her daughter as well. The old man said, and Kakashi nodded from his spot on the floor. We have her in custody now, Sandaime-sama. We are awaiting your orders on what to do with her. The orders for the assassination were located in the assassin's kunai case. Also, he had a will. It says he bequeaths all of his possessions to whomever it is that finally kills him, to whomever allows him to see his family once more. Kakashi replies, and Naruto sees the Sandaime turn to look towards Kakashi. I'm not joking, Hokage-sama. That was what it said, word for word. He wants the man who killed him to have all his worldly possessions. I don't know about the other part, but we tried to open the scroll with his possessions inside it, sir. But there was some kind of blood seal keeping us out of it. I'm not sure how whoever kills him was supposed to open it, I'm afraid. Kakashi reported, and Naruto felt his body shake. The man who murdered his mother left him everything he owned? Why? Have those items brought to me, Kakashi. I'm going to seal them away. Whoever this man was is not to be trusted. It's possible that he booby-trapped his possessions as some form of revenge. Sandaime said simply, and Kakashi stood back up and nodded slowly to the old man. Now then, if you'll excuse me, I have to speak with Naruto. The Sandaime said, and Naruto quickly pretended to be asleep as he opened the door. He heard the man walk over and then felt a hand on his head. I'm sorry for this, Naruto. But I won't let you become bent on revenge or power like that Uchiha boy. Memory seal. Forgotten darkness. The old man said, and Naruto's world turned to darkness. End flashback. Present. Naruto smirked while shaking his head. The Sandaime. He really shouldn't have tried to take those memories away from him like that. As a result, the young man had woken up in the hospital angry as hell when he realized how the Sandaime had took away the last shred of family he had away from him. You know, Sasuke, you shouldn't chase a person who doesn't want to be caught. They normally fight back. The boy's blue eyes showed the anger as he looked towards Sasuke, then reached back and pulled a ninjutsu from a sheath on his back before pointing it towards Sasuke. You stole from the village, Naruto. I'm here to drag you back home. And this time the Kyuubi won't be able to help you against me. Sasuke told the blonde while unsheathing Chokadu from his side and taking a quick stance. Said blonde teen's eyes narrowed when the boy said he stole from the village. In truth, the village stole from him. So just shut up, give up, and come with me. Sasuke said darkly. Naruto frowned at the dark-haired young man's words before then flipping his ninjutsu along his shoulders. Really? I actually thought you were here to enjoy the view. He said sarcastically, and Sasuke barely even twitched. Geese, why so serious? The blonde mumbled as Sasuke crouched back, assuming a stance, and Naruto simply glanced at him boredly. "Fine. If that's how you want to play it, I'll fight you one last time. Just don't go and cry when I kick the shit out of you," the blonde said, simply making the arrogant Uchiha smirk towards him, holding Chokatu at the ready. Valley of the End. "Come on Sasuke, why so serious? Learn to live a little, man," Naruto said to the dark-haired brooding boy, and Sasuke simply twitched. "Geese, talk about stiff, nay?" Naruto said to himself while Sasuke then lunged forward. The blonde-haired nin yawned as he then blocked the slash, much to Sasuke's surprise, and then kneed him in the stomach before then kicking him in the face, sending him sprawling back. "You know Sasuke, it takes a lot to truly piss me off," Naruto then said, and Sasuke growled before rushing towards the blonde once more. Said teen merely moved to the side, grabbed the back of Sasuke's robes and kneed him hard in the face. "One thing is hurting my friends, another is trying to kill me, and yet another is people calling me Kyuubi or monster or something I'm actually not," Naruto said while shaking his head, and Sasuke roared, lunging at the blonde and swinging Chokatu down towards him, only for the blonde to jump backwards and land on his feet perfectly. "But you want to know what pisses the fucking hell out of me most of all?" Now Naruto finally looked serious as his eyes showed a deep anger, causing Sasuke to actually recoil. "What pisses me off most of all is actually divided into two things. Lying to me, or keeping secrets from me," Naruto growled out as he then crouched and lunged forward, punching Sasuke in the nose and knocking him off the statue. "And you and Sakura screwing behind my back clearly falls into both fucking categories," Naruto shouted as he then jumped off the side of the statue and towards Sasuke, grasping the handle of his ninjutsu with both hands. Coming towards the dark-haired boy, he rolled in midair to avoid a kunai and blocked the second one before rearing his sword back and swinging down at Sasuke. The dark-haired boy had a mere second to block or be cut in half. It was only with some luck that he managed to hold back Naruto's sword. Pushing upward, Sasuke pushed Naruto back and the blonde went off balance. Sasuke quickly used this as he attempted to slash Naruto, only for the blonde to deflect the strike with his own blade. Naruto then lunged forward, swinging his sword at Sasuke as the boy blocked the blade as best he could. However, Naruto was pushing the dark-haired Uchiha child back towards the wall, concentrating on that. Naruto pushed as much strength into the ninjutsu swings as he could. The two teens fought one another with fierce intent, anger clear on the blonde and frustration on the Uchiha's face. The two swords sang as the two swung them in arcs and sparked as they brought them together. They glared at one another heatedly before then pushing each other back and lunging forward once more. Both swung their respective blades, the steel edges sparking as they grated together, only for Sasuke's skill to allow him to knock the blade out of Naruto's hand and send it flying. Naruto cursed while quickly rolling under Sasuke as that happened, and then unsnapped the buckle of his sheath and spun in place, using the sheath to block Sasuke's Chokatu before then sliding forward to elbow the dark-haired boy. He then moved his arm upward to knock Sasuke's Chokatu from his hands and send it to the rocks before grabbing the boy and throwing him into said rocks face first. "What, is that all you've got? Come on Sasuke, show me some real skill here," Naruto taunted angrily while tossing his sword's sheath to the side and glaring at the dark-haired Uchiha. Rising up, Sasuke lunged at the blonde with a roar, only for Naruto to duck low and kick his feet out from under him. Hitting the water, Sasuke got up once more and lunged at Naruto yet again, throwing punches and kicks at the blonde, the other boy simply dodging and evading them easily before then ramming himself into Sasuke with a headbutt, knocking the dark-haired teen to the ground. Sasuke slowly got back onto his feet once more and glared at the blonde with pure rage in his eyes, said blonde also getting up to glare at Sasuke. The dark-haired boy then lunged at Naruto, throwing his fist, but the blonde caught it and used a simple judo toss to throw Sasuke away from himself. Sasuke skidded along the water for a short while before then forming several hand seals and placing his fingers to his lips. "Kaden. Gukaku no Jutsu," the boy exclaimed as a fireball escaped his mouth and headed straight for Naruto. The blonde teen cursed loudly as he lunged forwards, then fell backwards, using his momentum to keep him sliding on the water and under the fireball before then flipping up and punching Sasuke right in the jaw. "I hate that damn fireball shit," Naruto exclaimed while letting out a few pants, Sasuke was panting even more heavily than the blonde however, and his eyes were wide with anger and frustration. What is this? How? How can this Dobi be beating me? How? I'm an Uchiha, an elite, damn it. How can someone so inferior to me ever injure me so greatly? Sasuke demanded, then had a thought, his eye twitching rapidly as he did. How long has he had this strength? How long has he been able to end me should he choose it? How long? The dark-haired boy wondered, then glared at the blonde-haired Jinchuriki. How long? Have you been making a complete fool out of me? Sasuke demanded as the rain moved his bangs to cover his own eyes, his face twisted into a snarl pointed towards the blonde who looked at him with a stoic expression on his face. How long, Naruto? How long have you been my better? How long have you been able to defeat me? How long have you held back all this power and made a fool of me? The Uchiha brat demanded as Naruto looked at him with a flat expression on his face before answering the other teen. I've always wondered what it would be like to kick the living shit out of you. But my promise to Sakura kept me from doing that. Naruto said mostly to himself as he walked over to Sasuke and picked him up by the front of his outfit, grinning at him darkly. I got to say, it feels pretty fucking good to not listen to her for once in my life. Naruto told the boy who glared at him while trying to register what it was that Naruto was actually saying to him in his own mind. What the hell is wrong with you, Dobi? Since when do you act like this? Sasuke demanded and Naruto scoffed before throwing the dark-haired boy behind himself. Oh, what was wrong with him? Sasuke wanted to know what was wrong with him. TCH, the Uchiha wasn't really prepared to know what Naruto knew now. Konoha, earlier. Man, old man, not only did you take my memories away, but you also knew who my father was. What the hell did I ever look up to you for? Or were you manipulating me so I'd remain loyal to Konoha or something? Naruto questioned angrily as he sat with his feet propped up on the Hokage's desk while reading his father's will. A painting was moved open to show a safe at his left side. It stated he was to learn of his heritage at 16, which was 4 months ago. Also he was to gain access to the Namikaze fortune should ever he need money. Also something that never happened. And last he was supposed to get something else, the sacred scroll of sealing. Damn village, they just love to keep me down. Naruto said with gritted teeth while looking over the will before picking up the second will he was supposed to read. This one was the one that belonged to his mother. This one stated that he was to gain the full fortune of the Uzumaki clan immediately, their scrolls, training, and everything else from the Konoha archives, and last he was supposed to get what was left of Uzu no Kuni's fucking fortunes entirely. Bastards, not only have they treated me like shit, I just bet they stole my fucking property and money. Naruto growled to himself before stowing the 2 wills of his parents into a seal on the sacred scroll and picked up the last one. It was Jiraiya's. Naruto actually looked sad seeing it and then felt anger as no one had told him about this one either. I'm beginning to wonder why I even bothered to put up with these bastards. Oh right, the damn third. Naruto growled to himself before then opening the will and looking it over quickly. This one was simple. He got the Toad contract, which was sealed into the will, all of Jiraiya's money, which was a sizable amount to say the least, the title of Gamma Sennin, and last was he got some jutsu Jiraiya wanted him to learn which were also sealed into the will. You always looked out for me in your own way, Arrow Sennin? He whispered to himself with a small smile before rolling up the will and sealing it into the sacred scroll. The blonde then looked at a final scroll on the desk and considered just rolling it up and tossing it away. But he didn't. Instead he reached out and opened the final scroll. This one belonged to the man who had murdered his mother all those years ago. He had to at least see what the man had left him, right? The man's will was simple. Naruto got everything he owned, including a plot of land in Uzu no Kuni, the home on it, the armory under the home, and any equipment he had with him on hand or sealed into a scroll on his person. Naruto looked at the scroll in question and pulled it open only to raise a brow when he saw an almost S-shaped symbol emblazoned within. What the fuck is this? He wondered before shrugging it off and pushing some of his chakra into it, only to blink when nothing happened. Alright, he said slowly before placing a finger to one of his lips and thinking with his eyes closed. The one who finally kills me, gains all my fortunes. When you kill a person you release killing intent or ki. However, that alone can't release a seal. Perhaps by adding chakra to ki it might. Naruto wondered aloud and focused a burst of both energies into the scroll, smirking when a plume of smoke appeared and then a gray utility belt like Anbu wore, a sheathed ninjutsu, gray shin and forearm guards, and some mesh coverings to go under those appeared. Wow, he really didn't carry much, Naruto said with a roll of his eyes before looking over the armor and found several seals had been embedded into them. It's easier with armor because it's not sharp, thus the seal only needs to clean and mend the armor, while with blades it needs to have extra added to it, if you wanted to sharpen the weapon without using a stone or having to take it in. Naruto said to himself, remembering what Jiraiya told him about seals before he passed on. No time to reminisce about the arrow Sennin, Naruto said to himself before then putting the armor on. As a child, Naruto would have considered the man who killed his mother evil, but now he knew it was only chance the man was hired to kill him, and that his mother got in the way. He truly hated the woman whom hired the man more than the man himself. After all, they were ninja, and as ninja being assassins was technically in their job description. Finished pulling on the few meager objects the man had left to him, Naruto then opened the sacred scroll before having a thought. The sacred scroll was made by his father and was technically a part of his clan, though the Sandaime must have tried to keep it as Konoha's alone, but his mother's scrolls were truly more interesting to him at the moment. Re-rolling the scroll, Naruto pulled a rope from its tips and tied it around his body before then placing one of his hands onto the handle of the ninjutsu that the unnamed assassin left to him. Whoever you were, no hard feelings, it was just another job, Naruto muttered before then running to a window and jumping out, quickly using a shunshin to vanish and reappear on top of a large building, letting out a breath as he did. Taking a thoughtful expression with his eyes closed, Naruto thought of the places his mother used to take him all the time and wondered if a clue was in them. The Hokage monument, but he figured that was so each of them could be near his father in a way. The park, but that was because she wanted him to make friends, even if it didn't work out too well. The Hokage Tower, to visit the old man, though Naruto was beginning to believe the old man was trying to manipulate him into a guardian for Konoha or something. Ichiraku ramen, of course they were the only ones who ever served Naruto something that wasn't poisoned. Higurashi weapons, but yet again they were the only ones who never overpriced him for weapons and equipment when he was starting at the Shinobi Academy. Frowning to himself, Naruto tried to remember any place of significance that they could have taken the scrolls to. Hell no, Naruto growled in his throat while his eyes flashed red. Fucking root. He growled out angrily and used a shunshin to vanish and appear at the head council member of Konoha's home. His name was Danzo, an old war hawk, and it seemed Naruto was going to have to steal his rightful inheritance from. Actually, that sounded like fun. Scaling a wall, Naruto focused chakra into one of his fingers before then placing it onto the glass of a window and making a large circle. His mother had once said that the Jukin wasn't the only style of combat to use chakra in your hands. Another was called Bloody Claw, a rabid style which focused chakra into most of the limbs for increased abilities, though wore you out with continuous use. She tried teaching it to him, but he preferred the Shadow Claw, which was a big brother to Bloody Claw in which you used stealth, speed, and evasion to defeat an opponent rather than brute strength. One of the abilities in Shadow Claw was a chakra claw technique, which could be used for cutting, thus he was glad his memories were back. Keeping his chakra-infused finger glued to the cut glass, he then pulled the glass from the rest of its form and caught it in one hand. Smirking, the blonde then reached inside with one arm and unlocked the window before then pushing it up quietly. Moving into the building silently, Naruto then jumped onto the roof and ran deep into the building, searching everywhere scrolls could be hidden. Frowning when he had finished with the fifth room, Naruto then took on a thoughtful look. Where would a paranoid old fart like Danzo keep his secrets? The blonde wondered before the proverbial light bulb went on in his mind. Smirking yet again, Naruto then walked into Danzo's bedroom, and while still on the ceiling he walked over to a picture. Checking it for a safe, Naruto frowned when he saw nothing, then turned to glare at the sleeping, snoring Danzo with a snarl. People like you are the reason I've always been alone, the blonde thought to himself before then opening a desk drawer and found an old document. Reading it, Naruto felt his eyes widen before he growled, eyes flashing red once more. Manipulative old fuck. He growled and pulled out a kunai but stopped from throwing it, placing the document back into the desk and his kunai back into its case. Naruto calmly left the building, relocked the window, before replacing the circle of glass he had cut and fused it back on with chakra. Using a shunshin once more, Naruto appeared in front of the Konoha library, his eyes filled with anger and betrayal. No fucking wonder they never let me in, he said to himself while pulling the mask up on his Anbu issue shirt and walked to the door, forming a Rasengan in his right hand, as he was sick and tired of subtlety at this point. Hurling the Rasengan into the door, the object was sent flying back as two surprised Chunin turned, only for the first to have his arm grabbed by Naruto, broken, then have himself tossed into a wall hard. Naruto then hurled 4 kunai at the other man, only for them to split, showing wire between them that held the Chunin to a wall. Hold this, Naruto said as he then placed a scroll in the Chunin's hand and tapped him on the hand. You let this go, it goes boom, along with you. Naruto then said to the man darkly, and his eyes widened as he looked at the scroll, and Naruto walked away from him. Walking to a metal door, Naruto formed another Rasengan and plowed through it with a frown, seeing 3 Anbu beyond the door. I've come to collect what's rightfully mine, Naruto said to the 3 who rushed towards him, making the blonde wonder what was up with ninja just rushing up to their opponents. Boom, Naruto said and exploded, knocking all 3 men back and into different places, groans and moans of pain clear. The real Naruto then walked into the room with a smirk as he passed the ninja on the floor and went straight for the place his mother's scrolls had been taken by Root. Apparently they were blood, chakra-sealed scrolls, and Danzo had tried numerous times to get Naruto to join him just to open them. Like hell he'd ever give his family's power to a nutjob like him. Reaching the place the scrolls were held, he opened it up and smirked, seeing the spiral on 4 different scrolls. Picking them up, he then opened the sacred scroll and sealed them into it, also allowing him to carry all of them. Halt! Came a cry, and Naruto turned his head to see Tsunade and a platoon of Anbu standing near the exit of the off-limits section to the Konoha library. Naruto then smirked to himself as he fingered a kunai, before then tossing it lazily towards them and smirking when it missed them all by a mile. That's a waste of a good. One of the Anbu started, only for the kunai to explode and knock all of them flying forward. I don't waste kunai, Naruto said simply, then looked down at Tsunade. Consider this my resignation as a Konoha shinobi, Naruto said as he then pulled down his mask and dropped his Hitai 8 to the floor in front of her wide eyes. Quote ellipsis. Ba-chan, make sure Iruka-sensei gets that back, he said darkly, before then walking towards the exit and using a shunshin to vanish once more. Present. You don't really care, Sasuke, you're just trying to stall me, and personally, I don't give a shit what you or anyone else thinks of me anymore. All my life no one ever watched my back for me. As he said this, Naruto dodged a Juken strike from Neji and glared at the boy. So I'll only watch my own back from now on, number 1 always comes first after all, the blonde said darkly, while then seeing Hinata, Ino, Sakura, and Kakashi appear. Naruto baka, what the hell do you think you're doing? Sakura questioned while moving towards him, and the blonde caught the fist she threw at him, surprising the pink-haired girl, who stiffened, seeing an absolutely furious look in his eyes. Piss off, Haruno, he said with a growl, before he then spun his body, kicked the pink-haired bitch's legs out from under her, and then judo tossed her into Sasuke, knocking both of them into the cliff wall and surprising the hell out of those who had seen him do it. Kami-sama, that felt good, Naruto exclaimed with a grin, then jumped up over Ino as she tried to take control of him with her Shintenshin no Jutsu. Nah, Naruto said while wagging a finger towards Ino, who fell, only for Hinata to catch her. It's not nice to try to control a person's mind, Ino, Naruto said, then looked at Kakashi and Neji with a smirk on his face. Come on, he said while making a simple gesture, and the 2 lunged at him. Naruto blocked a punch from Kakashi and flipped over the man as Neji tried to use the Juken style on him, only to hit Kakashi instead. Naruto then took hold of one of Kakashi's arms and tossed him into Neji, knocking both of them away. What's wrong with all you Konoha shinobi? Besides Lee and Guy, the rest of you are pathetic in a simple fucking fistfight. What? Are you all truly this useless when your opponent doesn't let you use those flashy-ass jutsu you're all so proud of? Naruto mocked while looking at Kakashi and Neji. The silver-haired Junin then pulled his Hitai 8 up, and Naruto smirked. Yeah, come on, now let's really get this party started, Naruto exclaimed as Kakashi rushed towards him, only to be surprised when the blonde went down underwater and came back up behind him with a spinning kick. The Sharingan is a truly powerful dojutsu. However, if you cannot see what your opponent is doing, You can't read it either. Naruto said simply with his arms crossed and a smirk on his face as Neji lunged at him from the side only for Naruto to flip over him and kick him in the back of the head. Come on Neji, if you honestly think I'm going to be caught by your Jukin, you've been drinking way too much with Lee. Naruto boasted, then sighed when a kunai came at him. Rather than grab it, Naruto moved back and let it hit Neji in the arm, causing the boy to grunt in pain. Kakashi, just stop it right now, or I'm not going to be playing games with any of you anymore. Naruto said simply while giving Kakashi a glare before then forming a Rasengan in his right hand. If that's your decision, let's get one thing straight. You're the ones who attacked me first. Naruto said while using a Shunshin to appear in front of Kakashi and sent him flying back with the Rasengan. And now if you'll all excuse me now, I've got to go. Naruto said with a smirk on his face while looking at the surprised or even angry expressions on the team's faces. Naruto smirked as he then flipped over Sasuke as he finally got back up to attack him. The blonde landed on all fours and then spun into a kick, knocking Sakura to the water, then flipped over her. The blonde rolled in the air and jumped off of Neji only to land in front of Hinata, his fist right in front of her face. Naruto-kun, she said lowly with Naruto's fist less than 2 inches away from her face. Please, don't go, she whispered to the boy with slight tears in her eyes, the blonde's blue eyes softening. Sorry Hinata, this is my choice, I leave no regrets behind. The blonde told the pale-eyed girl before then moving his hand and sunshining to the top of the valley statues. Long ago, a pack of wolves captured a small fox. They took the fox and made it hunt and feed them while leaving less than scraps for the fox to eat itself. This fox was clever, however, biding his time and making the wolves fat with the food it brought to them. Then when those wolves were fat, lazy, and content, the cunning fox left them and went to hunt alone, leaving those wolves to starve as he would feed only himself from now on. Naruto thought to himself as he then looked down at the Konoha shinobi before turning his back and running off towards his new life. As he ran, Naruto pulled out the shrunken sacred scroll and unrolled it, looking for something that could get him as far away as possible. He found it. It was an ancient forgotten jutsu created by the original summoners. What it did was take people to the spirit world to speak with the boss summons in order to form a contract with them. Naruto didn't know why the old ninja had stopped using it, but guessed over time numerous ninja went to the summons world only to vanish and never return or something like that. They probably met up with Manda. The blonde thought to himself as he continued reading the hand seals and, ironically, a chant in order to use the jutsu. The blonde-haired boy figured that going to the summons world was better than being in one that hated him or that tried to use him as some kind of tool. So as he ran, he continued to read up on the jutsu before nodding to himself and sprinted farther off, sure that the team had probably been healed by Sakura by now and were heading his way. Naruto frowned at that thought while re-rolling the sacred scroll and stowing it into a pocket, and then picked up the pace so he could have some more time for this jutsu to work. Stopping at clearing, Naruto went through the 50-some hand seals and then began to mutter a small chant under his breath. Finishing with that, he slammed his right hand into the ground and a white seal appeared below his feet. Closing his eyes, he pushed more chakra into the jutsu and watched as the seal turned an almost violet color and some kind of reflective portal opened up at his side. Dobi! Came a furious shout and Naruto cursed, seeing Sasuke was heading his way. Looking at the portal, then Naruto jumped into the portal and felt himself being pulled down. Behind him, Sasuke also jumped into the portal, chasing Naruto with an almost psychotic look on his face. Soon, Kakashi and Neji had also jumped into the portal, following after Sasuke to retrieve Naruto. Ino and Sakura soon followed after as well, and Hinata just behind them as the portal closed completely, locking the group into a swirling vortex of glowing light. Naruto! Sasuke yelled as he swung his reclaimed chokatu at the blonde-haired boy, only for Naruto to block with his arm guards. Back the fuck off, Teme! Naruto shouted back as he punched Sasuke, sending him rolling back into the rest of the team, and the color of the vortex changed, now becoming darker. Naruto seemed to freeze when this happened. His eyes widened when he finally hit the seal, and then, darkness overtook him completely. The soft pitter-patter of rain hitting a concrete street was the first thing he heard. The raindrops hitting his body and the cold concrete below him were the first things he felt as one of his fingers twitched. A blonde lay in an alley, trash cans and garbage to either of his sides. Opening his blue eyes, Naruto looked around and then pushed himself onto his back and looked up to the dark, stormy skies. I got away, he whispered to himself before chuckling lightly, then laughing to himself before laughing loudly. He got away, he had done something no one thought he was able to do. And he had gotten to make fools out of Sasuke, Kakashi, and Neji, the three supposed strongest in the entire village. Well, minus Might Guy and Rock Lee, of course. Naruto soon ceased his laughter and groaned softly as he pushed himself up off the ground. Placing a hand to his head, he looked around to take in his surroundings. An old alley with a fire escape to his right, with glowing neon lights on the buildings outside of the alley. This is definitely not the summons world. He muttered to himself and wondered what he had managed to fuck up with that jutsu, before then shrugging and deciding that he didn't really care. Hell, wherever he was it had to be better than his own world, that was for sure. Naruto moved on towards the exit of the alley, still disoriented, and placed a hand on the side of a building as he walked out to see numerous people in strange attire. It wasn't that he didn't figure his own clothes might be strange to them, but to him the clothing was quite. Stopping his mental tirade when he saw a woman who was in something most Konoha women would consider scandalous and Jiraiya would have loved to see on any woman. Naruto followed the woman's swaying hips and smirked to himself before then chuckling. I think I'm going to learn to like it here, he said to himself, then cracked his neck and listened to what the people in this strange place were saying. One thing he noticed was that they didn't speak Japanese. What they did speak was similar to a language his mother had taught him, which apparently came from a country Uzu no Kuni used to trade with. Walking over to a random, but young, woman, Naruto concentrated on remembering the damn words that were in this language. He was never happier to have a photographic memory than he was now. It had been a long while since his mom taught him that language after all. Excuse me, miss? Naruto said to the brown-haired young woman with a ponytail who looked around his age. The said woman blushed upon turning to see the blonde young man and smiled to him widely. Yes? She questioned, and Naruto thought on remembering that accursed language once more. Where am I exactly? I'm a bit of a wanderer and stumbled into town, Naruto said, then covered, and the girl seemed to accept that, so it wasn't out of the ordinary for this town at least. You're in Jump City, of course, the girl said cheerfully, and Naruto nodded his head slowly, and then had an idea. One that made a sly grin cross over his face. Thinking quickly, he remembered a couple more words before then placing an arm around the brunette's shoulders. Well, seeing as I'm new in town, I was wondering if you wouldn't mind giving me a tour. What do you say, cutie? The blonde questioned while smirking at the girl's blushing features and rapid nod of the head. The two then walked off, with the brown-haired girl talking about what there was to see in Jump City, mentioning a group of heroes called the Teen Titans. Though curious, Naruto decided to question the girl about these Teen Titans another time. Though for some reason, he had the strangest feeling he'd be meeting them soon enough. 2 hours later, Naruto's tour of the city had just ended with him asking his guide where the closest place to eat cheap it was, to which she promptly answered, directing him to a rather small Chinese restaurant. After that, he quickly thanked her and left for fear of being asked out when he really didn't need that at the moment. He just got his mind off Sakura after all. It would be really weird if that Teme or any of the others found me on a date with a strange girl when I had just arrived in this world. Though, it would be hilarious just to see the look on their faces at how quickly I managed to pick someone up. A few minutes after sitting down and ordering a bowl of shrimp fried rice, the front door to the restaurant was smashed open by a blast of dark pink energy. Looking to the door with a slightly annoyed look, the blonde teen saw a group of 3 other teens enter, the first of which was a girl around his age. She was a couple inches shorter than him, putting her at the same height as Sakura, with a very thin build and looked of the same body type and build as his old teammate Sakura. She had light gray skin, with 2 pink triangular tattoos on her face, one under each of her pink cat-like eyes. Her pink hair done up into a pair of horns with black bands, while her bangs hung over her eyebrows covering them from view. Looped around her slender neck was a black ribbon with a blue pendant hanging down from it like a cat collar. She wore an off-the-shoulder black dress with blue ruffles and buttons down the front, black and blue striped stockings down her legs, and black platform boots that had blue soles. Meaning she was even shorter than she appeared. Following the gray-skinned girl into the building was what Naruto thought was a 10-year-old from his size, maybe even a baby. The person was extremely short, with a green jumpsuit, which has an H and a yellow circle on each of the shoulders while covering his hands and feet with green gloves and boots. Steel plates covering the backs of his fists and thick steel soles on his boots. A pair of goggles on his forehead leaving his beady eyes visible. On his back is a circular backpack with controls reaching over his shoulders to hang down in front of his chest. Last was a massive teen that made Naruto wonder what his parents or whoever he lived with fed him. He is a very tall and muscular fellow with collar-length brown hair and a small goatee. He wears a sleeveless black shirt and long black pants. Studded gold bands cross his chest and run around his shoulders in an M shape. His feet clad in gold shoes of some sort that look armored like the chest armor and gold-studded bands around his wrists. The three of these teens walk over to a table as if they own the place and sit down as a waiter walks over to Naruto and sets his food down in front of him. "Excuse me, are these teen titans I've heard so much about?" Naruto asks his waiter curiously, only for him to receive a shocked look from his waiter. "No, that would be Jinx, Gizmo, and Mammoth. They're a couple of teenaged supervillains from Hive Academy. They come here all the time requesting free food. If they don't get it they smash up the place. I just hope the new guy doesn't bother them to leave." He replies quickly before leaving. The blonde shrugs his shoulders then starts to eat his Chinese. Just a few seconds later, another waiter walked out of the kitchen, rolling up his sleeves with a frown on his face, before standing in front of the three criminals and shouts at them. "Leave this restaurant immediately or I will be forced to call the police and have all of you arrested." He does not finish telling them off however, because the large guy that Naruto can only assume is this Mammoth, or whatever, lashes out with his left fist sending him straight into and through a wall before getting up and started to walk over to him as he says, "Guess it's time to put the new guy in his place." After saying this, he picks up the injured waiter by his collar and reaches his fist back in order to punch him yet again. Naruto, watching this display as he continues to eat, curses himself inwardly for his good side as he pushes out the chair to his left with his foot and kicks it into the air and then kicks it once more, sending it flying at the behemoth with one hand as he keeps eating. A loud thwack is heard as the chair hits Mammoth in the side of his head and breaks on impact. Getting up while rubbing his skull, the large teen begins growling in anger. He turns in the direction the chair came from to see a blonde teenager eating nonchalantly as if nothing at all had happened. "Who the hell do you think you are that makes it seem like a good idea to throw a chair at someone like me?" When he doesn't receive a reply, merely the boy ignoring him, Mammoth walks right up to Naruto and looks right into his eyes as he finishes eating. "Hey, I'm talking to you, you blonde idiot. Answer oof," he lets out as the table gets kicked right up into his chin by the blonde's knee. "Ow, what the fuck, you just made the single biggest mistake of your life, punk." Mammoth growled, grabbing Naruto by the front of his clothes and lifting him up to face him. "Is that so? Because, I just have to say, you don't seem like you're smart enough to realize when you're up against someone who not only hit you once with a chair while eating, but a second time with the table he was eating at when you got too close for comfort. Oh, and by the way, you definitely need some Tic Tacs or something because your breath stinks," Naruto says while waving a hand before his face as he then kicks Mammoth in the stomach and lands on his feet. The blonde then walks over to him as he charges chakra into his own fist before jumping and decking Mammoth right in the face, sending him to the ground and wall 5 feet away unconscious. Just as Naruto is walking away to return to his food, a man walks into the restaurant that makes Naruto pause and narrow his eyes. The man has a stern face with a prominent chin and gray-white hair that's slicked back. His dark gray eyes look at him first, then at the two still conscious members of the troika silently. He wears long flowing white robes trimmed with gold, and a black field on his chest has a stylized demonic skull on the front. "Headmaster Blood, is there something the matter?" The pink-haired girl, Naruto assumes she's Jinx, asks as she stands up from her seat only to bow to the old man. "Oh no, nothing's wrong at all, Miss Jinx. I was simply coming to retrieve you and your delinquent friends for deciding to ditch class yet again." When I saw this rather interesting young man beat Mr. Mammoth, right after telling him he would have lost in the first place no less. Turning to Naruto, the man starts to speak to him with a crisp tone. "Hello young man, my name is Bother Blood, headmaster of the Hive Academy. I was wondering if you wouldn't give me your name?" the man questioned with a slight smirk on her face. "Uzumaki Naruto, what of it?" The blonde said, then questioned with a raised brow as Blood rubbed his chin. Interesting name. Japanese if I'm not mistaken? The man questioned and Naruto nodded his head slowly to the man. Well anyway Mr. Uzumaki, to get straight to the point, I would like to offer you a place at my school if you're interested in becoming a villain. Or perhaps just a simple thief. As he says this, Brother Blood's dark gray eyes glow red for split second as Naruto feels something nudging him in his mind to accept this old man's offer. This feels strangely similar to one of Ino's techniques, though it feels slightly more refined. Maybe I'll go with him for now to see what this academy is all about. Who knows, maybe I'll be able to collect some information on these Teen Titans I've heard so much about. Or at least I might be able to find something to do. Naruto thought, then reached out a hand to shake Brother Blood's with a fake smile. Sure, I'll go. As long as I get free food and a good bed. Naruto replies smoothly and Blood give him the tiniest of grins before then looking over to Jinx and Gizmo. As for you two, I would suggest you try to keep a low profile, unless of course you actually want to be caught by the Teen Titans. Be thankful that your idiocy has led me to such a fine prospective student, or else I'd have you all in solitary for the next month. The man growls at the two who nod their heads to him quickly. Very well then, now Mr. Uzumaki, if you would please help Mr. Gizmo carry Mr. Mammoth. I'll take you to the academy where you can start first thing in the morning. Naruto nods as he walks over to the large boy and lifts one of his arms up with some strain while the small kid releases a pair of metal spider legs from his pack, then walks over with them and releases several metal tentacles which he uses them to get the other arm. The boy mutters something illegible under his breath that sounds like a curse as he helps Naruto lift the teen behemoth and follows Jinx and Brother Blood out the door of the restaurant. So, to the Hive Academy then. This is going to be fun. Ha 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 ha. Naruto thought to himself with a smirk as he and the rest of the Hive group walked out of the restaurant with Mammoth. 6 months later and Naruto had managed to become a respected member of the Hive Academy known as Tempest, primarily due to his wind jutsu. Like all students there, he was required to wear a uniform of their own design. That was when he decided to use a little more of the equipment he had inherited from the man who murdered his mother. He now wore a pair of baggy black shinobi pants with pockets on the sides, his kunai case at his right thigh, and a studded belt looped around his waist with 2 equipment pouches at the small of his back, a pair of steel-soled combat boots like robins that made a clinking sound as he walked. He still had his Anbu issue sleeveless shirt with the mask pulled up over his lower face. His red t-shirt remained the same, only with a black spiral put onto the left shoulder, a black headband with a red swirl over his forehead, and his shin, forearm guards and gloves. He also had a black Anbu armored vest that was of an odd design, having the shoulder and neck armor of a Chunin vest, was made of thick black leather with mesh weaved into the inside, while the bottom was rolled up at the bottom with thick buckles over it that held it onto his body tightly. Over all this he had a new ninjutsu which he had got out of that ninja's will. It was completely black with no guard, thick leather over the handle, with a string at the end which was for going around his wrist so he would lose it, and last he had a new sheath that was simply a sheath with one strap going over each shoulder and a final strap under his left arm to hold it on. Another difference between this sword and the other one was that a seal on the blade converted his chakra into wind, allowing him to use wind blades and the like without hand seals. During the past 6 months he had risen to the top in a few of his classes, most notable being infiltration, deception, stealth, hand-to-hand and armed combat, and the theory of assassination. He even had a small group of fangirls from some of these classes, which his newfound friend, Jinx, kept chasing off before anything drastic could happen like what happened to Sasuke. Of course his entrance exam hadn't exactly been a piece of cake, as he had to fight a girl named Cheshire. It had been interesting fighting this world's version of shinobi, that was without a doubt. Flashback. Naruto was sitting in a seat with an annoyed look in his eyes while watching several of what were supposed to be the best of the HIVE students. What he had seen thus far were a batch of losers who used their powers to solve their problems. Well, 2 or 3 weren't so bad. Jinx, the ninja girl Cheshire, and Private Hive were all decent hand-to-hand fighters. So Mr. Tempest, what do you think of the other students? Blood asked while entering the room, and Naruto rolled his eyes. Are these really your best students? Naruto questioned, and Brother Blood nodded his head with a slight smirk to his lips. Come on, The only ones with any real talent beyond some stupid flashy power is Jinx with her acrobatic moves, Private Hive with his shield and strength, and that Cheshire chick is a decent ninja to be able to vanish like she does and has some decent taijutsu moves. But the rest? Naruto said, then groaned, and Brother Blood chuckled in his throat. Really, then I suppose you fancy you could take any of them on and still win then? Mr. Tempest? Blood questioned, and Naruto snorted before nodding his head to the older man. Very well then, since you're so confident in your abilities. Your entrance exam for coming to the Hive Academy shall be taking on out finest hand-to-hand combatant, Miss Cheshire. Blood stated, and Naruto grinned slightly. Ninja versus ninja? Now that sounded like it would be fun. Sure, I'll take on your ninja chick, Naruto said with a grin under his mask, and Brother Blood nodded his head before heading out of the room with a smirk on his face. He'd show the new recruit his students weren't so weak. The next day, man, you really don't know what you're doing, do you? Mammoth asked Naruto, who rolled his eyes. Mammoth didn't even mind being beaten by Naruto. Apparently, he often needed some sense knocked into him, and more often than not it was Jinx who did the knocking. Ironically, she was his best friend. What's there to know, she's a kunoichi, I fought them all the time back home, Naruto said with a shrug while he and the rest of the troika headed to his exam in the main gym. He had given them all a fake backstory to his life. He basically said that he was from a hidden ninja village in Japan that had some technology but nothing like guns. He also said he had left because of corruption in the village as they strayed from the true ninja's path. Well, it technically wasn't a total lie. She's not just a kun. Wait, what the hell is a kunoichi? Gizmo started, then questioned, and ironically it was Jinx who answered. A female ninja. Most of them are better at infiltration and less physical dealings of the male ninja, aka shinobi, and usually seduce targets before killing them. Steal from guys in brothels, and have a better range of flexibility. Jinx replied, and the boys all looked at her with raised brows. What? Me and Cheshire are two of the top girls in school. We hang out with Bumblebee all the time, Jinx told them with a frown, and Naruto shrugged his shoulders. Whatever, she's still not so weak, man. She can take any one of us down with her hands tied behind her back and a blindfold on. Gizmo shouted, and Naruto scoffed. She's an average ninja. I never said she wasn't weak, just that I've dealt with kunoichi like her before, Naruto said simply, and Gizmo growled at the blonde before muttering about idiotic blonde fools under his breath. Whatever, see you guys after this test, Naruto said, walking into the gym while the troika headed to the stands. The gym was odd at the Hive, which was all Naruto could really say about it as he had only seen it in use from the outside thus far. It was large with yellow honeycomb-shaped tiles on the floor and walls, with stands for the other students to watch them. A reinforced glass room was near the upper center of the room and had controls for something in the gym. Walking into the room, Naruto saw his opponent sitting in the center of the room, her legs crossed into a lotus position. Cheshire had tanned skin like Naruto himself, with long black hair pulled into two long tails, somewhat like Tsunade, only with green cloth holding them apart, and a large cat mask on her face that had green eyes and a fanged grin. Black and pink whiskers painted on the sides to the eyes with two more black and pink stripes above them. She wore a green kimono top that was long enough to act as a short skirt with light green trim and long sleeves to cover her hands. A light green sash was wrapped tightly around her waist. She also had on a pair of high-heeled black boots with green socks coming down from the top of them. Looking at the girl's choices in footwear made Naruto wonder just how the hell she could ever be stealthy. The rest, however, somewhat made him think of an Anbu or Hunter Nin in terms of style, so he decided not to take her too lightly. Students, I would like to introduce you all to our newest prospective student, Mr. Tempest, Brother Blood said, and several people either booed or shouted something at the blonde, who grumbled under his breath about evil brats. And as his entrance exam, he will be fighting Miss Cheshire, Brother Blood said, and Cheshire looked up at him, and the blonde could almost swear she was checking him out. Though it wasn't that bad, Naruto had to admit girls checking him out were still kind of odd, though he figured that since he was the only other ninja in the school, she might just be checking what he could do physically. Now then, let the exam begin, Blood then exclaimed, and Cheshire literally vanished, making Naruto blink in surprise. Okay, that's not normal for any ninja, Naruto thought to himself while crouching slightly and looking around for the girl. He then ducked when he saw the girl's claws appeared in midair heading straight for him. Naruto then narrowed his eyes and flipped back and looked at the direction the claws had been. Naruto blinked when he saw a pair of green eyes and a fanged grin hanging in midair. Cheshire? Duh, Naruto thought to himself and lunged towards the disembodied face only to miss as the girl dodged him. Naruto growled angrily as he then spun into a kick only to hit nothing but air once more as the girl seemed to dodge then lunge at him. Her claws appeared once more and Naruto cursed, rolling to the side in order to avoid the girl's attack. Frowning, Naruto reached into one of his equipment pouches and tossed a smoke bomb to the ground, raising smoke to cover the area. Cheshire was surprised by the smoke bomb. Even though she herself had a couple, she wasn't expecting another person to actually use them. Looking around, Cheshire saw a shadow and tossed several shuriken from her sleeves towards the shadow only to see them pass through nothing. Cheshire then heard a whirling sound and flipped over several more shuriken while looking around the purple fog surrounding her. She then saw another shadow come at her and swiped her claws. She connected with a figure only for it to vanish in a plume of smoke. Inu, Akuma, Usagi, Habi, Ukami, Tori, Tanuki, Haku, Taka, Itachi, Mangusu, Kitsune, Yama, Tori, Inu, Taka, Neko. Came Naruto's voice from all around the room, spooking out both the students in the stands and Cheshire herself. Last time someone did this was when she was still in training with her masters. At that moment a shadow appeared and swiped its hands at her. Cheshire moved back on reflex, but her eyes widened seeing actual claws had sprouted from the blonde's hands. The teen came at her once more, swiping his claws at her as she dodged and tried to swipe at him with her own. The two met one another toe to toe, at least until Naruto caught one of the girl's arms, and then kicked her in the stomach, sending her flying out of the smoke and into the wall of the arena. Naruto then jumped out of the smoke into a flip and pulled his ninjutsu free when halfway to the floor, holding it out to his side as he crouched down on his feet in one hand, head bowed. Looking towards the now visible Cheshire, Naruto lunged forward, swinging his ninjutsu and carving a long gash out of the steel walls when Cheshire managed to dodge. Quite impressive, Blood muttered to himself while watching the fight from the control panel and leaned down to one of the technicians. "Bring it up to level 2. He said with a grin as his technician nodded his head before twisting a few knobs and pulling a lever down. Down below, the arena began to change. Naruto had to balance himself as several of the honeycomb tiles on the floor rose up like large pillars, some making rows or stands. Okay, this is really starting to get interesting, Naruto thought to himself as he then flipped from his spot and charged some chakra into his ninjutsu before then swinging the blade. A burst of wind coming off his sword and heading straight for Cheshire. The cat-masked girl rolled out of the way however and swung one of her arms, several shuriken flying from her sleeves towards Naruto. The blonde simply spun his sword to block the attack, then crouched and lunged forward. Naruto swung his ninjutsu and swung at Cheshire. The girl used her claws to block then swipe at the blonde. Naruto quickly moved to the side in order to avoid the attack, then backhanded the girl in the face, sending her stumbling back. Naruto then flipped his sword so he was holding it backwards and lunged at Cheshire, sending another blade of wind singing towards her. Cheshire managed to avoid the blade, however her right leg was sliced by the attack and she landed in a heap. Naruto let out a sigh of relief, hoping he wouldn't have to hurt the girl too badly when she tossed several more shuriken at him. The blonde cursed and flipped up into the air and over the attack as they hit a pillar behind him. "Go to level 5, Blood suddenly said from his spot in the control room, and his technician nodded his head to the old headmaster. Meanwhile, landing on the pillar, Naruto held onto it with chakra in his feet, only for the arena to change again. This time tendrils came out of the walls with guns of some sort and Naruto couldn't help but gawk. Shit, they don't play here, do they? He thought to himself before cursing and dodging a laser beam. Cheshire saw the blonde in the air and took the opportunity. Quickly getting onto one knee, the girl threw several shuriken towards the blonde-haired nin. Naruto cursed seeing the projectiles heading for him and grumbled under his breath about this being a bad time before he quickly sheathed his sword. Naruto then focused his chakra into his hands and then into the air around him before spinning in midair. Futon, Makyu Kaiten, wind release. Demonic rotation. Naruto exclaimed as what looked like a miniature tornado formed around his body, The shuriken spinning into the attack spun with it before then flying back towards a vastly surprised Cheshire. The dark-haired girl grunted as she flipped herself back and away from the shuriken and looked up to see several of the tendrils on the wall be ripped off by the blonde's attack. Up above, Blood grinned seeing the ability. I suppose that's why he calls himself Tempest. He controls the wind itself. The man thought to himself with a chuckle as the wind around Naruto slowly calmed and the blonde landed on the ground panting slightly. Damn it, I still haven't really perfected that one. I need to make it a priority if I take on people with guns in the future. Naruto thought to himself, then rolled out of the way as Cheshire lunged at him, swinging her claws down on the blonde. Naruto then reached back and unsheathed his sword to block Cheshire's next swipe. The blonde then grunted and lifted the blade up, cutting through the steel claws and then kneeing Cheshire in the chin. The girl was sent into a backwards flip and rolled to a halt against one of the pillars while Naruto sheathed his sword once more. Cheshire quickly pushed herself back up only for Naruto to lunge forward and push her out of the way of a laser blast. The girl then got to her feet and blinked when she saw Naruto chuckle. "You might want to cover up there, Neko-chan," he said and held out her sash, and Cheshire blushed so many shades of red she was sure she shouldn't have blood flowing to her brain or heart. Quickly getting back down, the girl pushed her robe closed and held it like that, cursing the blonde nin in her mind. The two then heard a clapping and turned towards where Brother Blood now stood, floating down on a pedestal with a smirk on his face. "Excellent work, Mr. Tempest. I must say I wasn't expecting you to actually defeat Miss Cheshire in such an interesting way, but nonetheless you have passed your entrance exam. Follow me to your new room so we can get you situated," Blood said to the boy as his platform landed and he walked off. Naruto looked at the sash in his hand, then over to Cheshire and let out a soft sigh before tossing it to the girl. "You might want to wear a belt under that if you don't want someone else pulling it off you," Naruto said to the girl before walking off after Brother Blood while Cheshire reached out and took her sash back with a lowered head. End flashback. That night he officially moved into the hive. He was given a room with two roommates, one of which was a kid whose outfit made him think of that Batman guy. He wore a gray, black outfit that looked like he had black underwear on the outside, black boots and gloves, a pale yellow belt, with a long cape that had a pale yellow circle at his chest to hold it to his shirt, with a strange mask that had mock bat ears. Last, his skin was light gray like Jinx, with a thin build, and his eyes were blood red with dark rings around them. This was his first roommate, known to those in the school as Kid Wykid. Kid himself somewhat reminded Naruto so much of his old friend, Shino, because he hardly ever talked, and when he did it was with logic and reasoning. Though he had only heard this from Angel, Kid never spoke to anyone but her for some reason. Later, Naruto found out that by moving into his cape, Kid could actually teleport to anywhere he could envision in his mind. Then there was the new guy in school. His other roommate was a strange teen who went by the name Stone. Stone had only been there for about a week and seemed to struggle with some of the same classes Naruto did. He was a tall, muscular, African-American teen who wore a black muscle shirt and a pair of blue jeans with a pair of combat boots and a studded belt around his waist. He also wore a pair of steel bracelets, a pair of rings that when smashed together, turned his entire body to living rock, similar to the guy that he heard about called Cinderblock. On his head he wore a steel circlet that matched his bracelets. Naruto didn't know much about him, however, but he could tell he was hiding something. Whatever it was really none of his business what the guy did after all. Currently, Naruto was walking with Jinx and Gizmo to the cafeteria for lunch after the one damn class that Naruto found to be as boring as one of Haruka-sensei's lectures on history, Theory of Mayhem. Honestly, he didn't see how anyone actually got what the hell Brother Blood was talking about when he came up with this shit. I mean, honestly, when am I actually going to use total war tactics that some dead old guy came up with when he was bored? I'm a damn ninja, for crying out loud. I should be killing people from the shadows, stealing top secret plans, and spying on the damn enemy. I'm not supposed to go plowing through an entire army like some huge behemoth. The blonde complained as he walked down the halls, his right eye twitching. Jinx simply shrugged her shoulders. She thought Naruto's way of thinking was better than blowing everything straight to hell. This could possibly be due to the fact that if they did destroy everything they'd have nothing left to steal. Not to mention she didn't fancy the idea of being the last girl on Earth and plainly the last person on Earth. The loneliness might kill her if that happened. Give it a goddamned rest already, Tempest. We hear this every time we have this damn class. Stealth this, and stealth that. Hell, I'd even bet that your tests were rigged. The little midget tells the boy with his arms crossed, and Naruto merely gives the bald midget a quick yet fierce glare. You want me to prove that I can sneak past anyone and anything, huh? Half pint. If so, then just name your challenge and I'll meet it. Gizmo simply smiles at Tempest's haughty response as they sit down at their normal table. Jinx slaps her face, seeing the look on the green-clad midget's face. That look always meant trouble for someone. And it looked like it was going to be Naruto today. Alright then, snot for brains, listen up and listen good. There's this suit in the Titan's Tower that was made by Robin himself a while ago for some reason. But from what I've heard, he stuffed it full of gadgets to take on the other Titans. I don't know exactly where he put it, but if you can manage to steal it, I'll not only believe that you can sneak past anyone, but I'll also do anything else you want. Gizmo said to the blonde confidently, and Naruto took a thoughtful expression. If I can get a suit that was supposedly powerful enough to beat the Titans, it will be almost impossible for anyone to stop me when I finally decide to leave here. The blonde thought, then smirked before holding a hand out to the pint-sized terror. Gizmo, you've got yourself a bet. With that, the two shook the other's hand. So then, what do I get if you fail to get the suit? Gizmo then asked with a grin, while Jinx just huffed and started eating without the two annoying boys. I won't. All I need to do is get the blueprints for the place from the Jump City archives and I'm set. The blonde replied, and Gizmo seems to remember something before then pulling something out of his backpack. Naruto sees that it appears to be a simple CD but has a feeling it's so much more. I managed to download that when we took over the tower a few months ago. It's the floor plan, blueprints, and air vent map for the entire Titan's Tower. Gizmo tells Naruto with a grin, making Jinx look up and glare at the pint-sized terror. You do know we could have used that to sneak into the tower ourselves, right? She asks of her teammate, and Gizmo blinks and lets out a small sigh. Unfortunately we can't. That scrum-buffing loser of a tin can only had the blueprints. Any access codes or sentry drones aren't shown on that map, so we'd still be going in half blind. Gizmo grumbled angrily, and Jinx blinked before shrugging her shoulders. Gizmo did manage to make some sense when he wasn't trying, at least, and Naruto quickly snatched the disc from the half pint. Thanks Baldy, I'll get it done over the weekend. Naruto says while pocketing the disc and wondering what he might need for this little venture into Titan's Tower. Hayep Academy, 4 in the morning 3 days later. Naruto walks down the halls of the hive with a smirk on his lips and a duffel bag slung over one shoulder. Within it is the X suit, and the broken remains of the thermal blaster Robin once used. He had grabbed the extra items to prove it was all real, maybe use the thermal blaster in the suit and he wouldn't have to hear any lip from Gizmo about none of it being real or something. Hey Gizmo, I got it. Naruto says as he walks into the room that the bald dwarf has all to himself, only to find the floor littered with mechanical parts. And there in the center of the room was the little boy asleep with a teddy bear that has goggles like his own in his arms in the bed. Unable to let this opportunity pass, Naruto takes out a small spy camera and snaps a few quick shots before putting it back into his pocket and leaning over Gizmo with a sadistic smirk on his face. Oh hey Angel, how you doing? Naruto questioned of no one while smirking. It was a wide-known fact Gizmo had a crush on Angel after all. What, Gizmo? No, I haven't seen him. You wanted to know if he could help you with something. At these words, the kid immediately jumps up out of bed and literally flies to his door to open it, only to close it with a fire-red blush on his face as he turns to glare at Naruto. What the hell was that for, Tempest? Gizmo demanded angrily of the laughing blonde-haired ninja. Naruto managed to calm down before getting up and wiped a tear from his eye. I got the suit for ya. Oh, and some weird parts that were lying around with the words, thermal blaster, under them. Gizmo's jaw literally drops at this and he takes the duffel bag it's in from his hands. All I want you to do is fix the thing up, figure out how it works for me, and maybe do a couple redesigns. Naruto said, then pulled a picture of what he wanted out of his kunai case. Hey, he was bored on his way back and decided to design what he wanted beforehand. Looking at the plans, Gizmo had a calculating look on his face for a few moments before then opening the bag and looking at the suit's belt. Shit, that crazy Gak Muncher used that for a power source. What is he, a damn nut? Gizmo wondered aloud, making Naruto raise a brow to the pint-sized terror, who then put the belt back in the large bag. You're going to have to give me a couple days to study it before I get to work on your version. I'll use your design if you let me use that chakra thing of yours to power it. Gizmo said with a simple tone and no cursing for once. Naruto took a thoughtful look before then looking at Gizmo skeptically. Is that all you want? To study my chakra? Naruto questioned of the annoying little midget who glared at him before nodding his head. The blonde teen couldn't help a small chuckle before he then gave a thumbs up to the pint-sized terror. Deal. The Troika's room. This room was an odd piece of work. Unlike the others, it had been made a bit larger due to the Troika being the shining stars of the hive before their defeat at the Titan's hands. Each of them had a door inside with a nameplate, which led to their individual bedrooms, while on the outside they had more entertainment-type things. A small workshop for Gizmo, a large comfy couch and TV for Mammoth, and last an art easel for Jinx, who amazingly enough had an artistic side. However, at the moment, our favorite blonde ninja Naruto was laughing loudly while Gizmo was growling and Mammoth was just plain confused. What's got temp in stitches? The lumbering brute questioned with a confused expression, and Gizmo pouted childishly with Naruto roaring with laughter. My ribs! The blonde exclaimed, holding said aching sides while trying to stop his hysterical laughter from becoming worse. And failing miserably. Soon, however, the blonde, by some small miracle of nature, managed to stop his laughter and looked to Mammoth while wiping a tear from his eye. Gizmo asked Angel to that dance tomorrow, got shot down and started to cry when she walked off with Kid. He said, then fell backwards, roaring with laughter once more, and Mammoth snickered. It's not fucking funny, ass wipes. The bald midget roared towards the blonde and his oversized burly friend angrily. Giz, Angel and Kid have been friends since they were 5, of course they'd be going to the dance together. Mammoth said, and Naruto blinked while slowly stopping his laughter, both Gizmo and he looking to the big guy. How do you know that? They both questioned with confused looks, and Mammoth stopped his chuckling and grinned nervously. Me and my sister Shimmer knew them back then, he admitted, and Gizmo started cursing loudly while Naruto just laughed once more. Say, who are you asking temp? I hear Cheshire kind of likes you. Well, in the weird, I want to kill him painfully yet respect him at the same time, kind of way, bud. The large teen said, and Naruto cringed at that. He'd heard about the girl's rather strange affection, vengeful anger towards him, and kind of wanted to steer clear of her for a good long while. Nah, you can't trust a ninja not to stab you in the back first chance. Naruto said while standing up and leaning against the door, only to flinch remembering a certain pink-haired girl who would forevermore have cheating whore boldly written over her massive forehead in his mind. Might not even bother going. Naruto then said with a shrug before leaning back, and Mammoth gawked. Are you nuts? This is like the only fun we get to have around here. Well, besides pranks, but that's another story. And even Jinx is going with that stone guy, for Christ's sake. The large man exclaimed, and Naruto waved him off with a frown. If you want, I could help set you up with someone or something. Mammoth offered, and Naruto raised a brow towards the big guy. Who are you taking then? He questioned, and Mammoth blushed. Leviathan, he admitted, and Gizmo fell out of his seat and shivered. The freaky sea serpent chick? He demanded loudly with wide eyes, and Mammoth glared. Hey, she's really not so bad when you look past the fact she has gills, claws, fins, scales, and a tail. The large teen argued, and Naruto blinked then sighed. Leviathan was a girl who reminded him of Isarabi in her sea beast form now that he thought about it. Man, why did that have to happen now of all times? Geese, would you two just calm down and relax? I wanted to know how you're doing on my suit anyways, Giz. Before I saw that lovely moment between you and Angel at least. The blonde said, then snickered, and Gizmo muttered something under his breath angrily before rubbing his face. Upgrading the suit to adapt to that chakra shit is impossible. The thing has a fail-safe bird brain installed, so no one could alter it. Unfortunately for him, I was able to copy the weapons and other supplementary systems in order to make a new, more advanced suit instead. The tiny terror explained, and then snorted. Good thing too, that bird-brained moron used xenothium of all things to power it. The bald midget exclaimed, and Naruto raised a brow in confusion. What the hell is Xena, that shit you were talking about? Naruto questioned, and Gizmo slapped his face. Xenothium, or It's a rare mineral that produces enough power to keep a decent-sized home going for a month with a small amount. However, it's highly unstable and usually ends up exploding and atomizing everything around it based on how much of it there is. Gizmo explained while sounding like a dictionary, making Naruto blink. Alright, so these rocks are bad news? He questioned, and Gizmo snorted. Depends on what you're using it for. If you want a useful power supply, you're fucked. If you want it for some kind of mega blaster cannon or something, you've got your new best friend in Xenothium. Gizmo said, and Naruto raised a brow. Wait, how is it unsuitable as a power source? The blonde questioned while scratching his head, and Gizmo let out a sigh. Because if you're not careful, it goes boom and atomizes you. Gizmo said with a frown, and Naruto grimaced. That didn't sound too appealing. Not to mention the stuff is rarer than hell. If you had a scanner, sure you could find some, but the only one of those in town are housed over at the LexCorp warehouse downtown. Gizmo said, and Naruto rolled his eyes. Okay, so what about you scanning my chakra to see if you can make it into a power source then? When's that happening, Giz? The teen questioned, and Gizmo grumbled under his breath and looked over at the blonde. Seeing as no one will notice, why not during the dance? Jinx has been gaga over stone for the past few weeks, so she wouldn't notice if a fucking truck hit her. Let alone me and you being missing tonight. Gizmo said, and Naruto frowned slightly. While true she did seem a tad bit too affectionate, Naruto had reason to believe it might be that brother blood guy who was doing it. Alright, Mammoth, cover for us or something. Naruto said with a nod, then to the large man who nodded his head with a yeah I know, towards the blonde and the midget, who both then nodded. Gizmo looked like he was about to start something when he swore loudly and pointed to a nearby clock. We've got a history of crime class in 5 minutes. He called out before jumping from his chair with Mammoth, while Naruto rolled his eyes, made a cage bunchin which he sent after his book, and calmly walked out of the room as Giz and Mammoth tried to find their books or whatever. The blonde was thinking to himself silently, at least until he bumped into someone. Well, more like walked into him then fell on his ass. Growling slightly, Naruto looked up with an annoyed frown, only to see his roommate Stone standing over him. Sorry Tempest, I thought you'd move out of the way. The big guy offered a hand to Naruto, and the blonde took it and got back to his feet. Yeah, well, I kind of space out every now and again, Naruto admitted while brushing himself off and walking back towards class when his cage bunchin dispelled itself at the next corner, leaving his book there. Walking to the corner, he kneeled down and picked up said item only to get a start. I didn't see that there before, Stone said mostly to himself while scratching his head, and Naruto chuckled nervously. Ancient ninja secret, the blonde said, and Stone shrugged. So I hear you're taking Jinx on a date of sorts, Naruto mentioned, and Stone grinned nervously. The last guy who had broken Jinx's heart had ended up with broken legs and arms, courtesy of an irate Tempest. Apparently he had a very bad temper when you messed with his friends like that. Yeah, I mean, well, she and I have been seeing a lot of each other lately, so I just kind of thought it would be fun too. Stone tried to explain far too quickly, and Naruto chuckled before patting the large teen on the back. Chill, tin head, I don't have a problem with you. Yet, we'll see what the future brings, however, Tempest said with an amused smirk beneath his mask while walking away and leaving Stone to gulp. The blonde then chuckled to himself and headed towards class, nearly laughing his head off when he heard Gizmo and Mammoth rush past him and into the room, the blonde ninja lazily following after them. The night of the dance. Naruto was annoyed as hell while looking at a simple, almost box-like device. Do you honestly expect me to fit in that? The blonde questioned, and Gizmo muttered under his breath. No, just do whatever you do with your chakra and put a hand into the box, he said, and Naruto frowned, before forming a small Rasengan and then placing it into the box. He was surprised when it didn't move and merely hovered. Okay, that's unusual, he said mostly to himself, then rubbed his face when he heard the music from the dance booming in his ears due to the volume they had it up to. Could they have that damn music any louder? The blonde grumbled angrily, and Gizmo ignored him, preferring to listen to his headphones while lightly bobbing his head from side to side and analyzing the Rasengan in the box. Holy shit, it's similar to Jinx's power, Gizmo said to himself, remembering the time he made some anti-Jinx gadgets because on Friday the 13th her powers went crazy and she nearly blew herself straight to hell. As he checked over the strange energy called chakra that the blonde used. Checking over a few more theories, he then moved on to a spectral analysis and found it was less similar to the Pinkette's own power on this scale before then moving on to attempting to siphon it and use it as energy. Well? Naruto questioned, and Gizmo held up a finger, making Naruto grunt in annoyance. Gizmo was working for a couple minutes longer, and Naruto felt his eye twitch as he continued to hear the dance music, only they were now playing a slightly less annoying song that sounded strange to him. Aha! Gizmo suddenly exclaimed and nearly gave the blonde a heart attack. Figure it out or what? The blonde questioned, and Gizmo nodded his head with a grin still on his face. Yeah, it's really not as bad as I thought. It's not magic, so I didn't have to worry about any of those or seals shit, and Jinx uses something slightly similar, in that it's a natural energy of the body at least. What I'll probably do is... Before the techno-whiz could continue his rant, Naruto made a sharp whistle and the boy blinked towards him. Yo, I don't need to know the details. Just tell me when it'll be finished is all. Naruto said, and Gizmo grumbled to himself before taking a thoughtful expression on his face and nodding. I'll have to get your measurements if you want it to actually fit you. The midget said, and the blonde shrugged before walking over, and Gizmo pulled out a scanner, which he then used to get the blonde's exact measurements down to his hair length. Alright, that'll be all I need. Just don't bug me for the next week or so and I'll have the suit all nice and pretty for you. Gizmo said while getting out a few of the designs for the suit Naruto had whipped up and his own, which featured circuitry and other such things. Naruto shrugged his shoulders before walking out of the room and placed his hands behind his neck and head. That night, Naruto was crawling through the air vents of the Hive Academy, several C4 explosives in a bag he was carrying with him. Take an arson class, he muttered, remembering when Jinx said he should take said class so he could blow bank vaults. To hell with the class, I'll take the damn explosives. He then muttered to himself and opened a vent, dropping himself into a seldom used room. Looking around, he walked over to a support beam at the far end of the room and placed the C4 onto it, before then setting the frequency on the bomb to the same as the others. Who needs a class for this? He muttered before taking hold of two wires on the bombs and placed them into the clay like C4. Naruto then looked around before walking over and jumped back into the vents, quickly returning the grate of the vent back to its proper place. He crawled off. Glad Giz managed to finish the new suit and all, but he didn't have to take so long with it. The blonde muttered under his breath and then blinked before pulling out a map he had in his belt and looked it over. That way, he said, turning, and went off towards another section, then removed the grate and dropped down. Looking around, he walked over to the next support beam and did the same as he did with the last. Nodding, he then turned and jumped back into the vents. Seriously, doesn't anyone know you're not supposed to have vents big enough for people to crawl through? He wondered aloud, then found his next spot and slowly opened the grate. Looking down, he inwardly cursed, finding Brother Blood's office. The one day I don't get detention for skipping class. He muttered, then dropped down and crawled over to a dark corner and placed the C4 down. However, before leaving, Naruto looked around, then walked over to a curtained area and moved it slightly. The girls' bathroom, he said thoughtfully, then put the curtain back before then snickering to himself. Never would have pegged him as a perv, the blonde said to himself, and started to walk off and jumped back into the vents above him. Why'd I always have to do the dirty work? He then whispered to himself while crawling through the vents and came to his next destination. Really, he was wondering why none of the other students had tried this yet. After all, who wouldn't love blowing up their school at some point? Honestly, they should have expected this. You can always trust a dishonest person to be dishonest after all. It's the honest ones you have to watch out for, as you never know when they'll do something incredibly stupid, Naruto said to himself before then jumping down to his next stop. 2 days later, the school was mostly empty, with a few stragglers remaining. The rest had all been sent on assignment to parts of the world. Brother Blood said it was for the final exams, but Naruto had a much different feeling, seeing as he, Mammoth, Gizmo, Jinx, Stone, a kid with one eye called Seymour, Kid Wykid, a burly teen called Private Hive, and Angel. They had all been asked to stay behind for something that Blood wanted them all to do. So now Naruto was sitting with some of those who had remained behind. Beside him was Jinx and Stone, to his other side was Mammoth and Gizmo, while the others were patrolling the rest of the school for the Titans. Thankfully no one is looking for my explosives, the blonde thought to himself while looking bored out of his mind. He was glad he had a cage bunch and gather his stuff while he was here. He only had his clothes and the hidden older RedX costume on his person at the moment, the suit hidden under his clothes. "What are we waiting for again?" the blonde questioned with a dull tone, and Stone slammed his hands together. His form then became covered with stone, making Naruto raise a brow. "Well, that doesn't really answer my question," Naruto mutters to himself while the others seem to be getting ready for a fight. Before them is a smirking brother Blood, making Naruto narrow his eyes, wondering what the psychotic telepath has up his sleeve. "Ah, they've finally arrived," the man then says, and Naruto looks towards where Blood is looking and sees none other than the Teen Titans he's heard so much about since coming to the hive. Behind the group was Cyborg, with Beast Boy in front, and to his left with Raven to the far left, Robin to his right, and Starfire to his far right. Looking at the group, Naruto listed what he knew of each of them. Starfire was first. She was cute in a little sister kind of way, and looked somewhat like a young version of his mom. She was ferociously loyal to her friends and those who earned her trust, and deeply despised anyone who harmed or saddened her friends. The girl has light orange skin, with deep emerald green eyes with a light green sclera, long blood red hair, and toned body while being on the tall side. She wore a purple tank top, purple miniskirt, and purple thigh-high boots with a silver metallic sole, a silver metallic belt, collar around her neck, and wrist protectors on her arms. Next was Robin. He was overly serious, had some issues with right and wrong, and was somewhat like Sasuke, only could cut loose and wasn't an arrogant ass. He had spiky black hair, with a black and white domino mask over his eyes. He had average skin, with an athletic build to his own body while being shorter than Naruto. He wore green tights, green gloves, and a green undershirt, with black steel-plated boots, a yellow utility belt, red armored vest over his upper torso with an R over his heart, and a black cape with a yellow interior. Then, Cyborg. From what he had heard, he was smart, fun to be around, had a good sense of humor, and seemed like the muscle of the group. But the Metal Man was also quite able to handle delicate situations and was one of the pillars that held the Titans together. Cyborg was African American and stood very tall, had a dark gray right eye with a red robotic eye on the left with blue cybernetic parts on his head and neck, gray parts on his face. His shoulders, forearms, and thighs all had the same blue parts, with his biceps, waist, calves, and upper thighs being pitch black. His upper chest and collar were gray with a square plate on the center of his chest. Both the backs of his hands and his fingers were gray, as well as his feet, hips, abs, and lower extremities, the rest all being white. Then came Beast Boy. He was a silly goof at first glance, but after paying some attention to him, Naruto noticed that not only was he not an annoying brat, but he in actuality seemed to be almost scarily similar to the blonde ninja. However, he wouldn't get into that as he wouldn't get onto the others. BB has grass green furry skin, with dark green hair, and jade green eyes. His ears are pointed, with a fang hanging over his lower lip, and a skinny form compared to the other Titans. He wore a black and purple jumpsuit, with a silver belt around his waist, gray gloves with an armored patch at the back of his fist, and a pair of black and purple sneakers with paw prints on the bottoms. Last but certainly not least, Naruto saw the Dark Titan herself, otherwise simply known as Raven. She was a strong girl, not physically, but she was far from helpless. She focused more on spiritual and mental strength, being the wit of the team and having a massive supply of magical skills to aid her friends. Raven was shorter than Robin, being a couple inches below Naruto's own height, with a curvy body to make up for it, violet eyes, with gray skin, and violet hair. Though most of this was obscured by the girl's hooded cloak, he had seen her enough on TV to know this. A gold brooch was holding it together, a red ruby in it. She also wore a black leotard, with black gloves on her hands that had blue cuffs at the wrists and a brooch at the back of each hand like her cloak had. A belt around her waist made of similar brooches, with two tassels hanging down her left leg, and a pair of simple blue boots to cover her feet. Not good, one of them, the green kid says, and Naruto looks to Blood. The Teen Titans. So nice to make your acquaintance. I'd introduce you to my students. Blood says while motioning to Naruto and the others. Naruto rolls his eyes however and then plants his chin into his palm. But I'm fairly certain you've already met most of them. Blood finished with a smirk and Naruto rolled his eyes, however he was then pulled to his feet by Stone and glared at the teen with an annoyed frown. Attack pattern Alpha. Stone then exclaimed, lunging forward with the troika while Naruto smirked beneath his mask and slipped off to the side. As the Titans and the Hive Kids start their little brawl, Naruto walks over to the side to wait for an opening. After all, he couldn't just blow the place to pieces without having a little fun beforehand. He sees his moment when Mammoth and BB come by and Naruto appears between them and grabs BB's arms. "Ha, now you're going to." Before the hairy teen can continue his short rant, Naruto uses BB's gorilla arms as leverage and flips around to plant both his feet into Mammoth's face, sending him flying away. After he is finished with that, Naruto moves his feet to the ground and tosses BB straight into Robin, knocking the dark-haired teen to the ground. "What the hell?" Gizmo exclaimed loudly, seeing this action, and then dodged Starfire. "Whose side are you on?" he demanded, and Naruto narrowed his eyes before throwing a kunai at the Tiny Terror's jetpack. Said Tiny Terror went flying erratically as Naruto then jumped up and kicked Starfire in the back, knocking her away as he then smirked beneath his mask. "Mine," he said to the midget, simply then rolled out of the way as Robin lunged at him and swung his staff. Naruto rolled into a crouch and quickly unsheathed his ninjutsu before then lunging at Robin. The two came together with Naruto smirking behind his mask. "What the hell? What are you, a thief or a villain?" Robin questioned of the blonde with a confused tone to his voice, only for Naruto to toss the dark-haired boy away and chuckle lightly to himself while sheathing his sword. "Why bother to put labels on everything, kid? I'm just one of a kind," Naruto said, simply then turned to see Jinx rush towards him and flipped over and grabbed her around her waist. "So, you were planning this from the start, huh?" Jinx asked with a scowl, and Naruto frowned under his mask. "No, but in my defense, I did say that a ninja would stab you in the back at the first chance," Naruto said to her, then jumped back when Starfire threw several of her starbolts at them. "Really now, is that all she can do?" Naruto questioned, and Jinx lifted one leg and kicked him in the shin, making him release the girl. "Maybe, but throwing hex bolts isn't all I've got," Jinx shouted and lunged at Naruto with a flying roundhouse kick. Meanwhile, Beast Boy was getting up when he saw this and then scratched his head with a confused expression. "Dude, is it me or is there like a break among their ranks?" he questioned, and Raven landed next to him with an annoyed expression. "Focus on fighting and less on that," she said while Cyborg had run off, ramming into Stone and knocking him through a wall. She then looked for herself and saw the blonde fighting with Jinx. Something about him seemed off, but she decided to worry about that later as she then blocked a blow from Mammoth, then pushed him back with BB as a gorilla. "Come on now, Jinx, I really didn't want us to leave on bad terms. But I can't just stay here," Naruto said, then grabbed one of her legs when she tried to kick him. "Really now, I'm beginning to think you don't like me much," Naruto then said, and was surprised when Jinx snarled and flipped, kicking him in the side of the face. "No, I liked you, but I don't like traitors," she growled, and Naruto blinked before shrugging his shoulders. "That's something we share in common then. But I never wanted to betray your friendship. Just blood, don't like him much after all," Naruto said while dodging kicks from the pink-haired girl and finding it ironic he didn't want to hurt her while he was pretty sure he'd murder Sakura if given the chance. "What's with me and pink-haired girls?" he then wondered before then flipping back and away from Jinx once more. "Really now, listen to me for one damn minute so I can explain," Naruto shouted while dodging the girl's attacks, only to then be kicked in the chest by the girl. The blonde went rolling backwards into one of the many pillars around the room and shook his head. Naruto groaned to himself before looking around and grimaced, seeing the Titans behind a force field nearby. "A lot of help you were," he mutters, then finds the troika glaring at him. "I'm in trouble now," Naruto then said before looking around and saw Stone throwing Cyborg out of a wall and into one of the beams in the room. The Titans and troika all turned to watch, save Jinx. She was just glaring at Naruto before walking over to him and crossing her arms. "You've got 1 minute," she said in a monotone, and Naruto blinked before nodding. "Well, you see now, I'm a dishonest person, as are you yourself," he said, and Jinx nodded her head. Hell, that was true. "And as a dishonest person you can expect me to do something dishonest," Naruto then said, and Jinx nodded her head to him once more. "Honestly, my reasoning for wanting to leave your lovely little academy is quite simple," Naruto then said, and Jinx leaned down to look at him. "And that is?" she questioned, and Naruto smirked beneath his mask. "Well, Beyond the fact that I don't like blood trying to control my mind? Naruto questioned, and Jinx looked in the older Mont's way with a frown. You're not affected either, Naruto then stated with narrowed eyes, and Jinx frowned. In case you've forgotten, I'm bad luck. He gets psychic backlash if he tries too hard. He can only leave little suggestions in my head, as far as I can tell from what Simone said. Jinx then says, and Naruto shrugs before then looking towards Blood then Stone. Said man was punching into Cyborg, only for Naruto to blink when Stone turned into Cyborg himself. Well, that just figures. I'm not the only traitor in the school after all, Naruto said, and Jinx looked only to blink and gawk towards Cyborg. I knew it, Gizmo then shouts angrily while Jinx stares at Cyborg. The stinking gag bag is one of them. The tiny terror exclaims loudly while Blood floats down from his place above the gymnasium floor and looks towards Naruto first with a frown before turning over to look at Cyborg. No, he's one of us now, the man states while holding up some gold and black device Naruto's never seen before. And I'm ready to prove it, Cyborg says while Blood places the device onto his right arm. The metal Mont's sonic cannon has wires attached to it. As Naruto sees that everyone is distracted, he reaches behind his back and takes out a remote detonator with a smirk. Never show off everything the first try, Blood, he thinks to himself while then slowly getting up. Jinx turning towards him as Cyborg points his cannon at the Titans. You said you had one more reason, right? She asked, and Naruto nodded his head. What? She questioned of the blonde who looked towards the pleading Titans, then Jinx and chuckled. I'll admit I'm probably a teme for this. But I don't do things out of the goodness of my heart. The only reason I came to this school was so I could learn how different this world was from my own. Take what you can, give nothing back and all, Naruto said, and Jinx frowned darkly. However, I have to admit, I did like you, and Gizmo, and Mammoth. To an extent, of course. At that moment, Cyborg yelled a loud psych, before then turning to fire towards them all. Naruto quickly grabbed Jinx and rolled away from the blast while keeping her safe. He then finished what he was saying. And I always did want to get out of here with a bang. With that he held up the detonator and pushed down on the button, massive explosions rocking the school as it then began to collapse around them. Naruto then quickly tossed Jinx over to Mammoth and stood up. And anyways, it would have been fun to play the villain a little longer to hang out with you guys. But I'm just a thief. And I stole what I wanted already, the blonde ninja said, then backed away from the hive members slowly. He then turned and began running up the side of the wall as Blood and the rest of the hive vanished, the Titans escaping with Raven's powers. The blonde halfway up the side of the wall then smirked and moved his flak jacket's zipper down before pulling up his red shirt slightly to show the black X suit beneath with its gray belt around his waist. Pressing a button on the belt, Naruto shimmered before then appearing in an alley somewhere and had to duck as a massive explosion sounded behind him and sent rubble flying everywhere. Next time, less explosives, he muttered under his breath while pushing his shirt back down and then walking over to a homeless man lying on the street. Naruto looked at the person before rolling his eyes and kicked the man and watched as he poofed out of existence to reveal a duffel bag. Picking it up, Naruto looked inside to find all his stuff, including some money he had managed to hoard for the past few months. Also was his new X suit, a picture of him with the Troika and some of their friends, and last was the sacred scroll. Nodding to himself, Naruto then turned and started to walk away from the now collapsing Hive Academy and couldn't help but chuckle lightly to himself. He then turned around and put away his armor and sword into the duffel bag, making sure that he wouldn't be recognized as Tempest without noticing his hair. Pulling down his mask, Naruto then walked out of the alley and down the street, whistling to himself as he did and blended into the rest of the crowd. Let's see, what can I do now? Naruto wondered to himself while walking through the crowd of people. Then he had a thought, since he had both the new and old X suits, why not use the old one to bug that Robin kid? Grinning, Naruto then thought back and remembered Gizmo saying that a warehouse for LexCorp downtown had a scanner to find that xenothium shit. Smirking, the blonde began to make a quite amusing plan in his head to mess with the Titans just a little. Elsewhere, it's been nearly a year now. Why are we still waiting to go look for that damn Dobie? A familiar voice demands while slamming his fists into a table, and a tired-sounding man answers him. Because Sasuke, we don't know anything about this world. If it wasn't for Ino's Shintention no Jutsu, we wouldn't even be able to speak their language. We need money, a place to stay, and a plausible reason to these people if we want to find and bring in Naruto. Kakashi said as he sat at a table wearing civilian clothing and an eye patch. He was currently rubbing his face, while also wondering what god or goddess he pissed off to have to deal with Sasuke for a whole year. Said boy was also the only one who refused to change from his shinobi clothing due to some stupid pride, and it was starting to annoy Kakashi greatly. Neji sat nearby, also wearing simple civilian clothing. He, unlike Sasuke, had managed to get a job like Kakashi. Neji worked at the tea shop, which the Titan girl Raven frequented, sometimes accompanied by her Tamaranian friend Starfire. Kakashi, he worked at a bookstore in town which Raven also visited, which allowed both to listen in on her in case they saw a blonde that fell under Naruto's description. Ino, Sakura, and Hinata were at high school at the moment, preferring to gather info from the younger generation, and learned quite a bit actually. 1. There was a group called the Hive, which took in super-powered evil teens, so it was possible Naruto went to this place. 2. There were numerous people in town with blonde hair of all shades, so asking for a blonde wouldn't be helpful anymore. And 3. Ninja were practically non-existent in this world. We have money and a place to stay, Kakashi. Why aren't we looking for Naruto now? Sasuke demanded angrily, wishing he could find the Dobi and teach him a lesson for bringing him to this backwater excuse for world. Because if we were to search for Naruto-san, not only would it attract unwanted attention to ourselves, but there is no guarantee that we could find him anyways. Neji said calmly, making Sasuke snarl in his direction. We are fortunate to have not been killed by the portal that brought us here, Uchiha. Do not test fate again. Neji said flatly, and Sasuke stormed off, leaving Neji and Kakashi alone. My god, he's even more unbearable than before, Kakashi said with a groan, and Neji nodded his head to the man. It seems he did not take the truth very well, Neji said, and Kakashi raised a brow towards the Hyuga. During his fight with Naruto-san, not only did he lose, but he learned that Naruto-san had been holding back for many years so he would not arm him. I believe he sees this as mocking him or making a fool out of him, and is becoming more and more hostile as a result. Neji explained calmly and flatly, as though not surprised, and Kakashi grimaced to himself. If Naruto was holding back, if he can beat the shit out of me, Neji, and Sasuke back to back without tiring, he could have been Hokage for sure. The silver-haired man thought to himself before then pulling out one of the books he had bought from work, and giggled perversely. Jump City, California? A silent figure jumps from roof to roof, heading towards the docks at the south end of town. The figure soon jumps off of the closest roof and lands before a single warehouse with a large L on the front, and mentally rolls his eyes. Holding out a single hand, a red X-shaped object flies forward and attaches to the front of door. The X begins to spark before vanishing, and the tumblers on the door slowly line into place. Quickly lunging forward, the figure places his hands into the crack between the doors and pulls them open, only to quickly rush in when he saw someone coming towards him. Looks like the silent alarm went off. It's simple, there's good and there's evil. There are those who commit crimes, and those who stop them. The Teen Titans had just arrived to investigating a silent alarm at the LexCorp warehouse at the docks of Jump City. They got there just in time to see a black-clad figure slip in through a partially opened door. The group quickly exited the T-car in order to give chase. Entering the building, the cyborg on the team activates his flashlight so they could see, only to view a black object turned down a corner, the night watchman left unconscious at his desk. There are those who commit crimes, and those who stop them. As they chased the strangely familiar figure, they noticed he made not a single sound. Even the Green Titan in dog form could hear neither a footstep nor a breath. They do hear a strange noise as they get closer to the elevator, however. Once they arrive at the elevator, they see an open grate on the ground and look just in time to see the figure fly out the shaft of the elevator by holding onto a grappling line. The two sides are opposite, as different as night and day. The Teen Titans quickly fly out the shaft, one being carried by a teammate, another using a grapple of his own, the next floating up quickly, the last forming into a bird to rise up as well. The thief has made it far, however, and crouches down to place one last mirror down, deflecting a net of them back into the wall. The thief quickly rushes past the lasers, and he smirks hearing the Titans following him, yet continues forward, and turns down another damn hall. The line between them is perfectly clear. Or at least, it's supposed to be. Exiting the last hall, the figure tosses another, static X, at a control panel beside a door, and it opens, allowing him to run into a large room with numerous boxes. However, the figure stops when he hears a shocked gasp from behind him and turns around to view the now shocked Teen Titans. Now what was revealed to them was someone they had thought they would never see again. He wore a black skin-tight suit with a black ragged cape flaring behind him, a jagged red X over his chest. Over his hands he wears a pair of gray gloves with a red X on each palm. Around his waist is an ash-gray belt with the compartments on the sides completely smoothed down, steel soles on the bottoms of his black boots, while covering his face is a full face mask that also covers his entire head. A white gothic metal skull that had no lower jaw covers the front of his mask, while over the right eye a jagged red X came over it, while the rest of his mask is black. RedX? I thought Robin was RedX. The green-skinned shape-shifter known as Beast Boy to friend and foe alike says out loud, only for the one in front of them to aim the palms of his gloves towards them before speaking. Think again, he says, firing X shurikens from his gloves. Titans, go! Robin shouts as the X's hit the ground and stick to the ground like shuriken, causing everyone but Raven to scatter. The Dark Titan floats forward a bit before erecting a shield around her to stop the exploding devices from hitting her. As the shield lowers, she looks to her right only to see X charging right at her. She brings up another black shield in front of her, only for him to jump up and teleport behind her and knocks her to the ground with a sweeping kick. Once she is on the ground, he pulls out another X shuriken and unfolds it, only for it to be blown out of his hand by Starfire as she starts to throw her starbolts at him. He jumps to avoid the bolts and ends up against a wall, sticking there with Chakra for a single second. He then jumps off and uses her back as a stepping stone on his way to the steel girders that are only a few feet from the ceiling, with her now hot on his trail. The girl then begins firing at him rapidly only to miss as he jumps from one girder to another. Suddenly, he turns in mid-air to fire red beams of energy from his hands that hit the side of two vertical girders. While she is flying in between the two only for them to ricochet in an X pattern, hitting her and shocking her to the ground as he lands in the junction between a vertical and horizontal girder. Just as he catches his breath, a green pterodactyl that he assumes is Beast Boy flies up behind him and charges at him before turning into an equally green orangutan that roars at the thief, only to get a red X shoved into his open jaws, forcing them to stay open. Struggling for a few seconds with the XBB soon solves the problem, as he turns into a hippo and the X falls out of his mouth. Only for the shapeshifter to look down and realize that he turned into an incredibly heavy animal on top of a very thin piece of metal. He looks down wide-eyed just as the girder he is on splits underneath his weight. Red X, having jumped off of the girder after placing the trap in Beast Boy's mouth, lands on the ground with a smirk underneath his mask as he watches the green hippo fall into a pile of boxes behind him. Hearing heavy footstep in front of him, he looks up to see Cyborg running at him. He holds out his left hand and launches another X at the metal team, wanting to use a static X. However, this one stops right in front of the cybernetic teen and expands. The ends reach out to stick to 4 boxes before pulling back like elastic, crashing the boxes into him. X manages to blink in surprise seeing this, and then inwardly wonders what the hell he did wrong before smirking. One left. He thinks to himself, then corrects himself as he sees Starfire, Beast Boy, Raven and Cyborg all get out of the predicaments that he put them in and surround him to attack. Someone sure has a chip on their shoulder. The thief thinks as Cyborg literally pushes a chip of wood off his shoulder, making the thief chuckle in his throat. He then quickly crouches down as they start to close in, and the thief points to the X on his chest as he tells them all, "Come on, kids." X marks the spot, just before jumping up to avoid a blast from Cyborg's sonic blaster, landing on a crate that Raven was preparing to throw at him, and jumped up again, avoiding another few starbolts from Starfire, only to land with his back to Beast Boy in a different gorilla form. He hits the teleporter built into the belt just as he is about to get crushed by a pair of large hairy fists. Puzzled at his sudden disappearance, Beast Boy shrugs his huge shoulders at Starfire and Raven, who are floating behind him. Red X reappears behind them all on a large pile of crates, only to be tackled by the traffic light, otherwise known as Robin. They tumble together for a minute before rolling onto their feet, from where Robin throws a birdarang at X, only for the thief to teleport out of the way of the odd-shaped shuriken. The Berserang quickly returns to Robin, while X suddenly appears behind him and attempts a right hook only for the younger boy to dodge and drop to the floor. Robin then quickly brings his legs up to kick, only for X to stop the kick with one hand, then fling himself back off of the steel-plated boots and behind the boy. Robin then snarls before quickly running towards X, with a punch aimed at the taller teen's head. X dodges the attack with lightning-fast reflexes before then catching the next punch and flips into the air. Bringing a foot down onto the Titan, X is surprised by his strength when Robin manages to catch the attack. The black-clothed thief is then thrown across the room and lands against a wall, groaning slightly in pain. Before he can even think to get up, however, Robin has descended on him and holds his head down with one arm, while X glares at him through his masked eyes. "Who are you?" Robin demands of the criminal before him, narrowing his eyes in suspicion. "If I wanted you to know that, would I be wearing a mask?" X says before grabbing Robin's arm and using a shocker built into the glove's palms. Robin shouts in pain as electricity courses through his body before then punching him hard enough to knock him back a few good feet into some boxes. Raven and Cyborg dash out from behind said boxes and charge at him, only for the cunning thief to launch another X at them as Raven begins to chant at the same time that Cyborg readies his sonic cannon to fire. Before either can attack, however, X sends another static X forward towards the two. The weapon sends out an electrical charge, which is sent through both Titans, causing them to hit one another with their attacks instead of the thief. "Looks like you got your wires crossed," he says jokingly before jumping back to avoid a bolt from Starfire and then jumping to avoid the Starbolt. He can't help but idly wonder if all she could do was fling those stupid balls of energy. That is before he put his hands together and launched a large X that hits the girl, sending her flying to a wall where it captures her. He then teleports over to her and puts his fingers on her chin to lift her face up before saying, "You know, cutie, the only crime here is that you and I haven't gone out on a..." Before he can finish, however, she hits him with more powerful bolts from her eyes. Alright, she does have something better than lame-ass star bolts. He thinks to himself as he ends up landing against a few boxes only to see Beast Boy coming at him while changing into a large bear. "I don't have time for this shit," the thief thinks to himself as he narrows his eyes on the charging bear. Responding quickly, the thief flips up and slams his open palm on the ground, creating a large X-shaped hole in the floor, which the green bear falls into with very wide eyes. "Watch your step," the thief says humorously as he jumps over the hole. Walking over to the still downed Robin, he pushes the boy Blunder out of the way with his foot and picks up something that looks a lot like a gun. "So this is the Xenothium scanner, finally found it at least," he says to himself as he picks it up. As he jumps over Robin, the boy Wonder manages to get up and starts to chase him again. "I won't let you get away with." Robin starts before being tripped by a stretchy X that wraps around his ankles, tripping him and making him hit his chin on the ground. X smirks to himself as he then turns around and looks at Robin while smirking under his mask. "Better luck next time, kid," he says as he spins the gun-like scanner around his finger before attaching it to his belt and then gives the boy Blunder a mock salute. Quote ellipsis, "And thanks for the suit." He pushes on the middle of the gray belt buckle, preparing to teleport, when it starts to work and then just stops. Looking down, X blinks behind his mask, then begins to press the button over and over again. Come on," he says urgently while pressing the button again as Robin starts to get up and breaks the bonds on his legs at long last. "Great, it's running low on juice," he mutters lowly before turning around and running away from the pursuing Robin. Jumping up through an open roof window, he keeps running, and the boy in traffic light tights remains in hot pursuit. This time, X begins punching the belt buckle and jumps, dodging another tackle attempt from Robin. He turns around in mid-air and gives yet another mock salute before speaking to the way too serious teen yet again. "Catch you later." With that, the thief shimmers out of existence, leaving a glaring Robin in his wake. When the blonde thief reappears, however, his is on the roof of a building a few mere blocks away, well out of sight of the Titans yet close enough that he didn't waste any of his remaining power. "Damn, now that's what I call fun," the thief says with a little chuckle and grins to himself as he reaches up and removes the skull mask to reveal the bright blue eyes, whiskered cheek, and spiked blonde hair of one Uzumaki Naruto. "Now, if I could just figure out how this thing works." He then SYS to himself as he unhooks the sensor from his belt and glares at the gun-shaped device.
That's all for now. If you enjoy this video, then please like, share and do comments.